Imagine a room where the air is thick with the scent of 500 years of secrets, a room guarded by men with ancient halberds and modern machine guns. Deep beneath the marble heart of Rome, there is a lie that has been curated for centuries. They tell you it is merely history, but it is actually a tomb of evidence. Hidden within 53 miles of shelving is a photograph that should not exist, a capture of a face from 2,000 years ago, frozen in the moment of its greatest agony. This is the Chronovisor's legacy. It is not just ink on parchment, it is a map of the things they chose to delete from your reality. Betrayal is written in the margins of every ledger. The curse of knowledge is the only thing that keeps these doors locked. The Vatican does not fear the past. They fear the moment you realize the past is still watching you. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. Lean back, let your eyes close, and feel the weight of the stone above us. We are descending into the silence. We begin our journey at the Cortile della Pigna, the court of the Pinnacone. The Roman moon hangs high, casting a silver pallor over the cobblestones. Everything here is built to last forever. Every pillar, every statue, every shadow. We walk toward a heavy, unmarked door. It does not creak when it opens, it breathes. This is the entrance to the Archivio Apostolico Vaticano. To the world, it was the secret archive for centuries. Only recently did they change the name, but the shadows within did not change. As we step inside, the temperature drops. The air is perfectly still, filtered and cooled to preserve the fragile skin of history. There is a specific smell here. It is the smell of beeswax, old leather, and a metallic tang that reminds one of cold iron. We are walking past the first of many checkpoints. Here, the Swiss Guard stands. They do not move. Their uniforms are vibrant, a stark contrast to the gray stone, but their eyes are as sharp as the blades they carry. Why guard paper with such intensity, you might wonder? Because in this place, paper is power. Information is the only currency that never devalues. Now, visualize the corridors. They do not end where your eyes expect them to. They stretch, mile after mile, into the subterranean darkness. 53 miles of shelving. If you were to walk from the first shelf to the last, it would take you nearly an entire day without stopping. But you cannot walk fast here. The weight of the words slows you down. Every shelf is a spine of a book. Every book is 1,000 pages of human drama. There are letters from queens pleading for their lives and decrees from emperors who thought they were gods. But as we move deeper, past the public records, the ink begins to change. We are moving into the scaffale di ferro, the iron shelves. In this section, the documents are not bound in gold or silk. They are wrapped in lead and kept in darkness. This is the forbidden ink. It is ink made from the crushed gall of oak trees and the soot of burned heretics. It is ink that was never meant to be read by the light of the sun. Can you hear the silence? It is not an empty silence. It is a heavy, crowded silence, as if 10,000 voices are whispering at once. But their mouths are covered by the dust of centuries. We stop at a specific alcove. The label on the box is written in a Latin script, so old it looks like thorns. This box contains the trial of the Knights Templar, the original scrolls, signed in blood and sweat. But even these are not the most dangerous things here. We continue walking. The floor beneath our feet is no longer polished marble. It is rough-hewn volcanic rock. We are now beneath the foundation of the Basilica itself. Here, the archives hold the records of the Chronovisor project. This was the machine that Father Ernetti built, a device designed to catch the electromagnetic echoes of the past. Imagine, The monks working in these depths, their quills scratching against parchment as they transcribed what they saw through the machine's lens. They were not looking at drawings, they were looking at live transmissions from the Roman Empire. They watched the crucifixion. They watched the burning of the Library of Alexandria. They saw things that would break a modern mind. The ink used to record these visions is different. It has a slight shimmer to it, a residual energy that makes the letters seem to vibrate when you look at them from the corner of your eye. This is why the archives are closed. It is not to protect the books from us, it is to protect us from the truth inside the books. Why does the Swiss Guard remain here 24 hours a day through the deep of the night? They are not just guarding against thieves, they are guarding against the leak of reality. If the common man knew what was written in the 53rd mile of these shelves, the social order of the world would dissolve. The guard is taught to look for things that aren't there. They are trained in the silence. They know the rhythm of the archive. They know that sometimes in the middle of the night, the temperature in the Scaffali de Ferro drops even further, and the sound of distant ancient chanting can be heard through the ventilation shafts. They do not investigate. They simply stand their ground. They are the human wall between our comfortable lies and the terrifying truth. We are reaching the end of the first mile now. Your breath is steady, your heart is slow. The darkness ahead is vast, but it is a welcoming darkness. It is the darkness of a long-forgotten memory. Think about the ink again. Think about how a single drop of black liquid can hold the fate of an empire. In this archive, there are maps of lands that no longer exist, and names of stars that have long since gone dark. There are formulas for medicines that could cure every disease, but they stay here, buried. Because a world without suffering would be a world the Church could not control. The moral decay of the entities that built this place is evident in every locked door. They chose to keep the light for themselves and leave the world in the fog. But tonight, as you drift toward sleep, you are a guest in their most private sanctuary. You are walking where no king is allowed to walk. We move further into the labyrinth. The walls here are lined with glass jars. Inside these jars are not specimens, but ash. The ash of the books that were deemed too dangerous even for the secret archive. They were burned, but their ghosts remain. Their titles are written on the jars in that same thorn-like script. The Great Library of the Invisible, the Gospel of the Shadow. The architecture of the void. Every step we take is a step further from the world, you know. The sounds of the city above, the sirens of Rome, the tourists in the square, they are all gone. There is only the rhythmic sound of your own breathing and the distant, slow drip of water somewhere in the lower catacombs. As we approach the final gate of this section, we see a sign. It is not a warning, it is a prayer. It asks for forgiveness for those who seek to know too much. But we do not fear knowledge. We seek the peace that comes from understanding the scale of the mystery. We have walked through the silence, and we have seen the miles of ink. But the ink is just the shadow of the truth. Behind the next door, the iron gives way to something else. Behind the next door lies the origin of the image that changed everything. The archive is a body, and we have just touched the skin. In the next chapter of our journey, we will reach the heart. We will speak of the year 1952 and the man who found a way to turn the silence into sound and the darkness into a photograph of the divine. The air is getting colder now. The lights are flickering out, one by one. The Swiss Guard is fading into the shadows. You are safe here, surrounded by the wisdom of the ages, wrapped in the heavy velvet of the past. Let the miles of shelves guide you into a deep, dreamless rest. The ink is dry, the door is locked. But the story has only just begun. There is a room deep within the Vatican Secret Archives that does not exist on any map. In 1952, a Benedictine monk named Father Pellegrino Ernetti claimed he had seen the impossible. He did not just read history, he watched it. He claimed to have co-invented a machine called the Chronovisor, a device that could tune into the lingering electromagnetic frequencies of the past. He claimed to have stood in the dust of ancient Rome and watched the dying breaths of giants. But then the silence began. The machine was dismantled. The blueprints vanished. The Church issued a decree. Anyone caught using such a device would be instantly excommunicated. Why would a man of God create a window into time, only for the hand of the Pope to slam it shut? Was it a fraud, or was it a truth so dangerous it threatened the very foundation of human faith? This is the truth the king buried. Now let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are going back to Venice, 1950-2. Venice is a city built on water and secrets. It was here that Father Ernetti, a world-renowned authority on archaic music, began to notice something strange. He was working with a fellow priest, Father Gemelli, trying to record a Gregorian chant. They were using a primitive wire recorder, a machine of spinning metal and magnetic dreams. Suddenly they heard a voice that should not have been there. It was Gemelli's father, a man long dead, speaking through the static. This was the spark. Ernetti was not just a monk. He was a physicist. He understood that every word ever spoken, every action ever taken, leaves a trace in the atmosphere. Energy cannot be destroyed. It only changes form. He gathered a team of 12 brilliant minds, including a Nobel Prize winner and a rocket scientist. Together, they built a machine of cathode tubes and silver dials. They called it the Chronovisor. Imagine a television that does not receive signals from a tower, but from the fabric of time itself. Ernetti described the experience as watching a play. He spoke of seeing Mussolini. He spoke of seeing Napoleon. But then he went further back. He claimed to have witnessed the Roman orator Cicero delivering a speech in the year 63 before the Common Era. He described the texture of the robes, the heat of the sun, and the exact cadence of a dead language. By the late 1960s, rumors began to leak out of the monastery. A magazine published a photograph, a grainy image of the face of Christ. Ernetti claimed the Chronovisor had captured this moment. The world gasped, but the Vatican moved faster. The image was labeled a fake, a replica. The critics said it was merely a wood carving, but Ernetti never recanted. On his deathbed in 1994, his last words were whispered to his family. He insisted the machine was real, that it worked, and that it had been hidden to protect humanity from itself. If we could see the past, we would see every lie told by every king. We would see the true face of every prophet. We would see the blood on the hands of the powerful. The Chronovisor was not a machine of science. It was a mirror of truth. And the world, perhaps, was not ready to look into it. As you drift deeper into the quiet, remember that some machines are never truly destroyed. They are simply moved to where the light cannot reach them. But the Chronovisor was not the only secret the Vatican held. There's another file, a file concerning a map that does not show lands but lives. We will open that file soon. But for now, let the darkness be your blanket. The truth is safe. Sleep now. The file is closed to understand the weight of Father Ernetti's claims. One must understand the precision he described. This was not a vague dream or a blurry vision. The Chronovisor, as he detailed it, functioned with the clarity of a modern broadcast. He claimed that the team had figured out how to tune the device to specific coordinates in both space and time. They were not just looking at the past. They were looking at a specific street corner in a specific year. One of the first major tests involved the Roman Empire. Ernetti spoke of witnessing a performance of a lost play by Quintus Ennius called Thyestes. This play was legendary among historians, but had been lost to the sands of time for centuries. Ernetti did not just say he saw it. He transcribed the text. He noted the way the actors moved, the specific intonation of their Latin, and the reaction of the crowd. He described the smell of the torches and the texture of the stone benches. For a historian, this was the ultimate forbidden fruit. To have the lost works of antiquity restored by a machine made of vacuum tubes and silver wire was a miracle that science was not ready to explain, but the machine did not stop at theater. Ernetti claimed the team watched the rise and fall of Napoleon Bonaparte. They watched the emperor pace in his chambers, listening to the clatter of his boots on the wooden floor. They heard the private conversations of men who changed the world, voices that were supposed to be silent forever. The psychological impact on the team was profound. Imagine the burden of knowing every secret ever whispered in a dark room. Imagine the power of knowing exactly how every war began and exactly who was to blame. How did Ernetti justify this to the scientific community? He leaned on a theory that is still debated in the fringes of physics today. He believed that every human being is composed of energy and that energy is never truly lost. When you speak a word, the sound waves travel through the air, but the electromagnetic signature of that event remains etched into the atmosphere. He called it a sphere of light and sound that surrounds the Earth. The Chronovisor was designed to act as a receiver for these lingering echoes. It used a series of antennas made of a special alloy that could pick up these incredibly faint signals. Once the signal was captured, it was processed through a sequence of quartz crystals and cathode ray tubes to reconstruct the image and the sound. It was like reconstructive surgery for time itself. The team noticed that as they looked further back into the past, the signals became harder to tune. The noise of the present would often interfere with the signal of the past. To get a clear image of ancient history, they had to operate the machine in the dead of night in the deepest basements of the monastery, where the modern world's radio waves could not penetrate. It was in these hours of silence that they saw the things that eventually led to the machine's destruction. As word of the Chronovisor's success reached the highest levels of the Vatican, a shadow began to fall over the project. The Church has always been the keeper of mysteries, but the Chronovisor posed a threat that was unlike any other. If every moment of history could be seen, then the concept of faith would be fundamentally altered. Faith requires a leap into the unknown, but the Chronovisor offered absolute certainty. If a person could look back and see the exact moment of a miracle, or the exact moment a religious text was written, the mystery would vanish. More dangerously, what if the machine revealed that history was different from what the scriptures taught? What if the truth found in the Chronovisor contradicted the truth guarded by the Church for 2,000 years? The tension within the team grew. Some wanted to reveal the machine to the world, believing it would usher in a new era of human understanding and honesty. They argued that a world without secrets would be a world without lies, a world where justice was absolute. But Ernetti, despite his scientific brilliance, was a man of the cloth. He began to see the machine not as a tool of enlightenment, but as a weapon of chaos. The order came from the top. It was not a suggestion. It was a mandate of absolute silence. The team was ordered to dismantle the device. Every component was cataloged and moved to a secure location within the Vatican Secret Archives. The scientists were made to sign oaths of secrecy that carried the weight of excommunication and divine judgment. The Vatican issued an official decree stating that any person using a device with such characteristics would be cast out of the church forever. They did not name the Chronovisor specifically, but everyone in the inner circle knew what it meant. The machine was dead, or so the world was told, but Ernetti remained. For the rest of his life, he was a man divided. He continued his work as a respected priest and musician, but the weight of what he had seen never left his eyes. He became a ghost in his own life, a man who had seen the face of time and was told to forget it. He was often seen sitting alone in the gardens of the monastery, staring into the distance as if he were still watching the Roman sun set over a city that had been dust for 2 millennia. In the next part of our journey, we will explore the leaked photographs that nearly broke the Vatican's seal of silence. We will look at the deathbed confession of Father Ernetti and the modern search for the hidden blueprints. The shadows are long and the secrets are deep. Stay in the quiet. Stay in the dark. The year was 1972. For 2 decades, the secret of the Chronovisor had been whispered only in the shadows of the Vatican's corridors. But then the seal was broken. An Italian magazine called La Domenica del Corriere published a headline that sent shockwaves through the world of faith and science. They claimed to have the proof. They published a photograph, a grainy, high-contrast image of a man in agony. It was the face of Christ on the cross. Father Ernetti claimed this was a direct capture from the Chronovisor. He described how the team had tuned the machine to the year 33. He spoke of the heavy atmosphere of Jerusalem, the sound of the wind, and the terrifying reality of witnessing the foundation of his own faith. To the public, this was the ultimate revelation. If the photograph was real, then history was no longer a matter of interpretation. It was a recorded fact. However, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Critics pointed to a wood carving in a shrine in Collevalenza, noting that the photograph and the carving were identical. The Vatican, instead of defending Ernetti, remained silent or issued vague denials. They allowed the world to believe it was a hoax. They allowed Ernetti's reputation to be tarnished. But those close to the monk knew the truth was more complex. Ernetti himself never stopped insisting that the machine was functional. He claimed the photograph was merely a visual representation of what the machine could do, a way to explain the impossible to a world that only believed in what it could see. Think about the implications of that moment. If the Church had confirmed the photograph, every religious war, every theological debate, and every mystery of the soul would have been settled by a machine of wires and glass. The Church did not fear the lie. They feared the truth. They feared a world where God could be found in a cathode ray tube. As the decades passed, Father Ernetti retreated further into the silence of the Benedictine order. He was a man who possessed the ultimate knowledge but was forbidden from sharing it. In 1994, as the end of his life approached, the weight of the Chronovisor returned on his deathbed. Ernetti was visited by a close friend and a fellow priest. The air in the room was heavy with the scent of incense and the coming of the night. It was here, in the final hours of his consciousness, that Ernetti spoke his final truth. He did not recant. He did not admit to a hoax. Instead, he whispered that the machine had been hidden because it was too dangerous for the human mind to handle. He claimed that the team of 12 scientists had reached a terrifying conclusion. They realized that the Chronovisor did not just see the past. It could see the future. Because time is a single, continuous fabric, once you learn how to tune into the frequency of what has been, it is only a matter of mathematics to tune into what will be. A machine that can see the future would end human will. It would turn the world into a prison of destiny. Ernetti's final words were a warning. He said that the blueprints were safe, hidden where no man could find them until humanity had evolved beyond its need for secrets. When he passed away, the Vatican sent men to secure his private papers within hours. They left nothing behind. No notes, no diagrams, no traces of the man who had looked through the eyes of time. Today, the Chronovisor remains one of the most protected secrets in the history of the Vatican. Researchers and conspiracy theorists alike continue to search for the 12 apostles of science who worked with Ernetti. Names like Enrico Fermi and Werner von Braun have been linked to the project. Though no official record exists, there are those who believe the machine was never actually dismantled. They believe it still sits in a climate-controlled room beneath the city of Rome, its silver dials still humming with the energy of the universe. They believe the Vatican uses it to monitor potential threats, to stay one step ahead of the tides of history. But as you lie here in the quiet, consider a different possibility. Perhaps the Chronovisor was not a physical machine at all. Perhaps Ernetti had discovered a way to access the Akashic records, the collective memory of the universe itself. Perhaps the cathode tubes and wires were just a way for him to ground a spiritual experience into the language of science. The world is much older and much deeper than we are taught. Every shadow in your room holds a memory of 1,000 years ago. The air you breathe has been exhaled by kings and peasants, by saints and sinners. We are all swimming in the sea of time, and sometimes, for a brief moment, the water becomes clear. Why do we crave the secrets of the past? Why are we drawn to the stories of forbidden machines and erased history? It is because we know, deep in our bones, that we are missing a part of the story. We feel the weight of the years we did not live. We feel the presence of the ghosts who shaped the world we walk in. Father Ernetti was a man who tried to bridge that gap. He tried to bring the light of the past into the darkness of the present. And for a moment he succeeded. He saw the face of history without the mask of time. He heard the voices of the dead and felt the heat of suns that have long since set, but the silence that followed was not a punishment. It was a gift. The mystery is what makes life precious. The unknown is what gives us the space to grow. If we knew everything, if every secret was revealed and every lie was exposed, the world would lose its color. We need the shadows. We need the quiet rooms and the hidden archives. We need the stories that keep us awake at night, wondering what is truly real. Relax your mind now. Let the image of the silver dials and the glowing tubes fade away. The monastery is quiet. The bells of Venice have stopped ringing. The water of the canals is still and dark. You are here in the present where you belong. The past is a dream, and the future is a whisper. As you drift into the deepest layers of sleep, know that the Chronovisor was only the beginning. The Vatican Secret Archives hold more than just machines for seeing time. There is a section of the library dedicated to things that are not of this earth. Files that describe stars that shouldn't exist and maps that lead to places that have no name. We will explore those forbidden maps when you wake in another time in another story. But for now, let the darkness be your sanctuary. In May of 1972, a single grainy image appeared on the cover of an Italian magazine that threatened to dismantle 2,000 years of human history. This was not a painting or a recreation. It was claimed to be a direct photograph of the Messiah, captured not by a camera in the present, but by a machine that peered into the past. The image showed a face frozen in the agony of the crucifixion, a blurred and haunted gaze that looked directly into the lens of a device that shouldn't exist. Within days, the papacy descended into a state of panic. This was the ultimate betrayal of faith. If the machine was real, it meant that the most sacred mysteries of the Vatican were no longer safe. It meant that every hidden lie, every buried curse, and every secret decree ever issued by a pope could be watched by anyone with a silver dial and a cathode ray tube. The Vatican didn't just deny the photo. They attempted to erase the man who held it. They branded the image a fraud, a replica of a wood carving, and a dangerous deception designed to lead the faithful into darkness. But the question remains, why would a brilliant monk risk excommunication for a lie? This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are returning to the moment the shutter clicked across time. The magazine was called La Domenica del Corriere. For decades, it had covered the Monday news of Italy, but on this particular morning, it carried a secret that had been guarded in silence for 20 years. The photograph was black and white, blurry, and possessed a haunting quality that felt older than the paper it was printed on. Father Pellegrino Ernetti had finally allowed a piece of his impossible invention to be seen by the world. He claimed that the Chronovisor had successfully tuned into the frequency of the year 33. He described the process as a delicate dance of signals, where the machine had to filter out the noise of millions of souls to find a single moment in Jerusalem. The team had watched the events of the Passion unfold in real time. They had heard the cries of the crowd and the sound of the hammers, but it was the face that stopped them. Ernetti described a moment where the figure on the cross seemed to look past the soldiers, past the dust, and directly into the viewing screen of the machine. It was a look of profound recognition, as if the past was aware that the future was finally watching. This was the photograph that sent shockwaves through the halls of the Vatican. If a machine could capture the face of the Messiah, it could capture anything. It could capture the corruption of kings and the secret sins of the clergy. The power of the Church had always rested on the mystery of the unseen. But Ernetti had made the unseen visible. Take a moment to visualize the image as Ernetti described it. It was not the polished, glowing art found in the cathedrals of Rome. It was raw. It was human. The hair was matted with sweat and blood. The eyes were heavy with a weight that no human could carry. There was a strange glow around the edges of the frame. A side effect of the Chronovisor's magnetic field as it struggled to hold the past in place. Ernetti claimed that the team spent weeks analyzing the photograph. They compared the facial structure to the Shroud of Turin. They looked at the bone structure, the shape of the nose, and the exact placement of the wounds. To the scientists on the team, the Nobel laureates and the physicists, it was a biological reality. To the Vatican, it was a theological nightmare. The papacy knew that if this photograph was accepted as true, they would lose control of the narrative of history. People would no longer need priests to tell them what happened in the past. They could see it for themselves. The Vatican Secret Archives are built on the idea that some things are too dangerous for the public to know. And a photograph from 2,000 years ago was at the very top of that list. The response from the critics was swift and calculated. Within weeks of the photograph's publication, articles began to appear claiming that the image was a direct copy of a wood carving located in a small shrine in Calavelenza. The carving, created by a Spanish artist, bore a striking resemblance to the photograph. The skeptics shouted that Ernetti had simply taken a picture of a statue and claimed it was the past. They called him a dreamer who had lost his grip on reality. They called him a fraud who sought fame at the expense of his order. The Vatican joined in the chorus, quietly encouraging the idea that the monk had been deceived by his own desires. But those who knew Ernetti knew that he was a man of cold, hard science. He was a master of archaic music and a physicist who understood the laws of energy. Why would a man who had helped build the most advanced device in history resort to such a simple, easily debunked trick? Ernetti himself remained defiant. He claimed that the artist of the statue had actually been inspired by a vision that matched the true face of the past. He argued that the truth has a way of leaking into the world through many channels, and the Chronovisor was simply the most direct one. The pressure became unbearable. The monk was forbidden from speaking to the press. His laboratory was raided and his equipment was seized by men in dark robes who answered only to the Pope. The photograph was officially declared a hoax, and the world was told to look away. But the image had already been burned into the collective consciousness of humanity. Once you have seen the face of the past, you can never truly be the same. To understand how this photograph could even exist, we must look at the theories that Ernetti left behind. He believed that everything we do is recorded in the very fabric of the air. He called it the Akashic resonance, a layer of the atmosphere that stores every light wave and every sound wave that has ever been generated when a person speaks. The sound doesn't just disappear, it vibrates the molecules of the air, and those vibrations eventually settle into a permanent state. The same is true for light. The light that reflected off the face of a king 1,000 years ago is still traveling, still vibrating in a dimension we cannot see. The Chronovisor was built to be a net that could catch these old vibrations. Imagine a lake where a stone was thrown 100 years ago. To us, the surface looks still. But if you have a machine sensitive enough, you can still find the tiny ripples that the stone created. You can calculate the exact size of the stone and the exact spot where it hit the water. This is what Ernetti was doing with time. He was finding the ripples of the Messiah's life in the still air of the present. The photograph was not a picture of a body. It was a picture of the energy that body left behind. This is why it looks so strange, so haunting. It was a reconstruction of light that had been traveling for 2 millennia. It was a ghost made of mathematics. And for the Vatican, a ghost made of math was more terrifying than any demon, because you cannot exorcise the truth. We must also consider the men who stood in that dark room and watched the images flicker to life. They were not just spectators. They were the first humans in history to break the barrier of the linear world. They described a feeling of profound vertigo, as if their own lives were becoming thin and transparent. If the past is always there, then what does that say about the present? Are we just creating ripples that will be watched by someone in the future? Is there any such thing as a private moment, or is every secret act a permanent record in the library of the air? One of the scientists on the team reportedly suffered a nervous breakdown after seeing the crucifixion. He could not reconcile the physical reality of the event with the spiritual stories he had been told since childhood. The machine had stripped away the gold leaf and the incense of the church, leaving only the cold, hard reality of suffering and dust. This was the danger that the Vatican understood better than anyone. They knew that if the public saw the truth, the myth would die. And the myth was the source of their power. Ernetti was not alone in this project. He claimed that 12 world-renowned scientists assisted him. Some rumors suggest that Enrico Fermi, the architect of the nuclear age, was among them. Others whisper the name of Werner von Braun, the man who put humanity on the moon. If these men were involved, it means the Chronovisor was not the hobby of a lonely monk. It was a high-level scientific operation that involved the greatest minds of the 20th century. But after the photograph scandal of 1972, these names disappeared from the narrative. Their journals were cleared, their files were classified, and their connections to Ernetti were severed. It was a masterclass in institutional erasure. The Vatican used its influence to ensure that the Chronovisor was seen as a fringe theory, a curiosity for the superstitious. They buried the evidence under layers of ridicule and bureaucratic silence. But you cannot bury the light forever. The signals are still there, vibrating in the room around you right now. Every word I speak is joining that record. Every breath you take is being etched into the air. Where is the machine now? Some say it was destroyed, its silver dials crushed, and its vacuum tube shattered. But others believe it was simply moved. There are reports of a high-security facility deep beneath the Vatican, a place where the temperature is kept perfectly still and the electromagnetic noise of the world is blocked out by walls of lead. They say that the Chronovisor is still operational, but it is no longer used to watch the Messiah. It is used to watch the present. It is used to anticipate the movements of nations and the shifts in human thought. It has become the ultimate tool of surveillance, a way to see the ripples before the stone even hits the water. Father Ernetti's invention was meant to be a gift to history, a way to learn from our mistakes and find the truth in our origins. But in the hands of the powerful, it became a weapon of control. The photograph was just a warning shot, a glimpse of what happens when the past and the future collide. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep. Think about that grainy photograph. Think about the face that looked back at the machine. Was it a fraud? Or was it the most important document in the history of the world? If it was a fraud, why did the Vatican pass a law specifically banning the use of such devices under the threat of excommunication? You do not ban something that doesn't work. You do not threaten a man's soul over a piece of wood and a camera. You only act with that much force when you are afraid. The Vatican was afraid of what Father Ernetti had found. They were afraid of the window he had opened. And they were especially afraid of what lay beyond the photograph. Because the Messiah was not the only thing the team saw. They saw things that predated the church. They saw things that predated humanity itself. The photograph of the Messiah was the secret that broke the silence, but it was not the secret that broke the scientists. There was another discovery, one that Ernetti only mentioned in his most private letters. While tuning the Chronovisor to the ancient world, the team accidentally stumbled upon a signal that didn't belong to any human era. They found a recording of a city that does not appear in any history book. A city made of light and sound that existed before the first stone was laid in Egypt. The archives call this the pre-Adamite signal. It is the record of a civilization that was erased not by time, but by something much more calculated. We will explore the ruins of that silent city and the forbidden maps that lead to its gates in our next journey. The archives are opening a new floor. The light is changing. Stay in the quiet. The next file is waiting. Every word you have ever whispered, every tear that has hit the floor, and every secret you have buried in the dark is still alive. The greatest lie ever told to humanity is that the past is dead and gone. It is not. It is merely vibrating at a frequency your eyes can no longer see. The Vatican knew this. They understood that the atmosphere is a giant, eternal recording device that never stops. When Father Ernetti and his team of 12 scientists built the Chronovisor, they weren't building a time machine in the way Hollywood imagines it. They were building a radio for the soul. They were tapping into the forbidden residual energy that coats the world like a second skin. They realized that every historical event leaves a permanent scar on the fabric of reality, a light wave that never stops traveling and a sound wave that never truly fades. By capturing these echoes, they committed the ultimate betrayal against the laws of nature. They pulled the curtain back on the secret history of the world, revealing that nothing is ever truly private and no crime is ever truly hidden. They found that the air around us is thick with the ghosts of ancient battles, the prayers of forgotten saints, and the screams of those erased from the history books. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the laboratory of the light, where the echoes of the past are finally being caught. To understand the science of the Chronovisor, you must first forget everything you know about time. Imagine that time is not a line but a vast, deep ocean. When you throw a stone into that ocean, ripples spread out. Even when the stone hits the bottom and the surface looks still, the energy of that impact is still moving through the water. It is still vibrating the molecules. The Chronovisor was designed to be the ultimate sensor, capable of detecting the tiniest ripple from a stone thrown 2,000 years ago. Father Ernetti's genius lay in his understanding of harmonic resonance. He realized that every object, every person, and every event has a unique frequency. This is what physicists call a residual energy signature. When light hits an object, it doesn't just bounce off. It leaves a trace. When a voice speaks, the sound waves compress the air, and that compression leaves a microscopic signature on the surrounding environment. The team of scientists used vacuum tubes filled with noble gases and crystals of pure quartz to create a filter. They had to tune out the overwhelming noise of the present day to hear the whispers of the past. It was like trying to hear a single candle flickering in the middle of a hurricane. But as they tuned the dials, the noise of modern life began to fall away. The roar of the city, the static of the radio waves, and the hum of electricity dissolved into a profound, heavy silence. And in that silence, they heard the first echo. It was a rhythmic, pulsing sound like the beating of a giant heart. It was the frequency of the earth itself, the base layer upon which all of history is recorded. The machine used 3 primary antennas made of a secret alloy of silver and copper. These antennas were placed in a triangular formation to create a field of hypersensitivity. This field could capture the stray electromagnetic waves that were still bouncing around the atmosphere from centuries ago. In physics, we know that light travels at a constant speed. But what Ernetti proposed was that light also leaves a shadow in the fifth dimension, a place where time does not exist. As they focused the machine on specific coordinates in Rome, the viewing screen began to glow with a pale violet light. This was the color of the vacuum, the color of the space between moments. Suddenly, shapes began to form. They were not solid at first. They looked like smoke, swirling and twisting in the wind. But as the scientists adjusted the quartz oscillators, the smoke began to solidify into human forms. They saw a market in the year 63. They saw people moving in slow motion, their clothes a dull gray, their faces blurred by the distance of time. But the most incredible part was the sound. They didn't just see the market, they heard it. They heard the clinking of coins, the shouting of merchants, and the barking of dogs. These sounds were not being replayed from a recording. They were being pulled directly from the air of the room. The chronovisor was turning the residual energy of the past back into physical sound. It was as if the room itself was remembering what it had seen 2,000 years ago. The realization that every moment is recorded forever had a devastating effect on the team. If the air remembers everything, then there is no such thing as a secret. Every lie a politician tells, every betrayal a lover commits, and every hidden sin of a priest is archived in the atmosphere. The chronovisor was not just a scientific tool. It was a mirror of the human soul. Ernetti wrote in his private journals about the terror of this discovery. He realized that if the public knew that they were always being watched by the past and the future, the very nature of human society would change. People would live in a state of constant fear. The freedom to make mistakes, to grow, and to change depends on the privacy of the moment. By removing that privacy, the chronovisor threatened to turn the world into a panopticon, a prison where the walls are made of time itself. This is likely why the Vatican stepped in so forcefully. They understood that the power of the Church, and indeed the power of all governments, relies on the control of information. They rely on the ability to write history the way they want it to be seen. If a machine could show the absolute, unvarnished truth of any event, the official narratives of the world would crumble. The erased history that Lord Slumber seeks to uncover is exactly what the chronovisor was designed to reveal. The Church didn't destroy the machine because it was a fraud. They destroyed it because it worked too well. They destroyed it because they were afraid of what would happen if humanity finally saw itself without the mask of the lie. Consider the objects in your own room right now. The chair you sit in, the walls that surround you, the very air you breathe, they are all recording you. They are soaking up the heat of your body and the frequency of your thoughts. In 100 years or 1,000, someone with a machine like the chronovisor could tune into this exact moment. They could see the way the light from your screen hits your face. They could hear the rhythm of your breathing as you drift toward sleep. This is the science of residual energy. It is the belief that nothing is ever truly lost. We are all leaving a trail behind us, a path of light and sound that stretches back to the moment of our birth and forward to the moment of our death. The chronovisor was simply a way to walk back along that path. The team found that certain materials were better at holding these memories than others. Stone, especially limestone and granite, acted like a natural hard drive. Ancient cathedrals and monuments were thick with the energy of the millions of people who had passed through them. This is why people often feel a sense of presence in old buildings. It isn't a ghost in the traditional sense. It is the residual energy of the past vibrating against the present. The chronovisor amplified these vibrations until they were visible to the human eye. It turned the web of a place into a high-definition broadcast dot. As the project neared its end, the scientists began to notice something strange. There were certain areas of history that were completely silent. No matter how they tuned the machine, they could find no signal, no light, and no sound. It was as if someone had gone back and erased the recording. These dark spots in time were often located around major historical turning points. Ernetti hypothesized that there were forces, perhaps even other civilizations, that had the technology to shield themselves from the Chronovisor. They had figured out how to cancel out their own residual energy, leaving a void in the atmosphere where their history should be. These were the true, forbidden chapters of our world. The moments that were deemed too dangerous even for the eternal record of the air. One of these dark spots occurred during the construction of the Great Pyramids. Another was found in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, dating back 12,000 years. Whenever the team tried to look into these moments, the viewing screen would go pitch black, and the speakers would emit a low, terrifying hum that made the scientists physically ill. It was a warning, a sign that some doors are not meant to be opened, even by the light of science. In the final months before the Vatican seized the equipment, Ernetti made one last adjustment to the frequency filters. He wanted to see the absolute beginning. He wanted to see if the machine could capture the first light of the universe. He called it the alpha signal. The team gathered in the basement, the air thick with the smell of ozone and the hum of the silver antennas. As they pushed the dials past the limits of human history, the machine began to vibrate violently. The glass tubes glowed with a blinding white light. For a split second, the screen showed something that defied all logic. It wasn't a world of matter, but a world of pure geometry, a lattice of light that stretched out in every direction. They weren't looking at the past anymore. They were looking at the blueprint. They were looking at the code that generates reality itself. But before they could record the data, the power was cut. The heavy doors of the laboratory were kicked open. The men in the black robes had arrived. The alpha signal was lost, and the scientists were scattered to the corners of the earth. But the energy of that moment didn't vanish. It is still out there, floating in the atmosphere, waiting for someone else to build a receiver. The science of residual energy tells us that the truth can be suppressed, but it can never be destroyed. It is woven into the air we breathe. It is the silent passenger in every room. Now, as the world around you becomes still, feel the air against your skin. It is not empty. It is a library of every moment that has ever occurred. The history of the stars, the rise and fall of empires, and the secret thoughts of every soul are all vibrating around you in the dark. Father Ernetti is gone, and his machine is hidden in a vault that no map can find. But the principles he discovered remain. You don't need a chronovisor to feel the weight of the past. You only need to be still enough to hear the echoes. You only need to be quiet enough to see the shadows that the light leaves behind. The monastery is silent now. The silver antennas have stopped spinning. The noble gases have cooled in their tubes. The laboratory is empty, but the record is still playing. It plays in the rustle of the leaves, in the creak of the floorboards, and in the steady beat of your own heart. You are a part of the record now. Your peace, your rest, and your dreams are being etched into the atmosphere for all of eternity. The Vatican thinks they have won. They think that by hiding the machine, they have hidden the truth. But they forget that they are also being recorded. Every decree they sign, every secret they bury, and every lie they tell is leaving a permanent scar on the air of Rome. The Chronovisor was just a tool, but the energy it sought to capture is universal. It is the ultimate justice. In the end, there is no hiding. There is only the long, slow resonance of what we have done. The archives of the unseen are always open. Even if we cannot see the pages, sleep now in the knowledge that you are safe in the hands of time. The past is not a ghost to be feared, but a foundation to be understood. The echoes are not a curse, but a reminder that we are never truly alone. We are all connected by the silver wires of history, vibrating together in the great, dark silence of the universe. The science of residual energy explained how the machine caught the echoes of the past, but it didn't explain the most terrifying discovery of all. While searching for the alpha signal, the team found a frequency that shouldn't exist. It was a signal that was being broadcast from inside the Earth's core. It wasn't an echo of a human voice, but a rhythmic, mechanical code that had been playing for millions of years before the first human was born. The team called it the Architect's Pulse. It is the reason why the Vatican is so desperate to keep the Chronovisor a secret. They aren't just hiding our history. They are hiding who is actually running the machine. We will explore the pulse of the architect and the mechanical heart of the world in our next archive entry. The floor is shifting. The deeper secrets are calling. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading. In the winter of 1958, a candlelit procession moved through the hidden corridors of the Apostolic Palace, led by a man who held the keys to heaven and the secrets of time. Pope Pius XII did not gather his cardinals to discuss theology or prayer. He gathered them to witness a crime against reality. Behind the heavy, locked doors of the Sala Regia, a machine hummed with the energy of 1,000 dead suns. On a small, flickering screen, the high-ranking officials of the church watched as the past unspooled before their eyes. They didn't see the glorious history written in their own scriptures. They saw a truth so cold, so terrifying, and so contradictory to the faith they guarded that it threatened to turn the Vatican into a tomb of lies. This was the ultimate betrayal. The machine, Father Ernetti's Chronovisor, had found something that was never meant to be seen. It had found the pre-Adamite signal, a recording of a world that existed before the Garden of Eden, a world that proved humanity was not the first and would not be the last. The Pope, his face pale in the silver light of the vacuum tubes, issued a decree that would change history by erasing it. He ordered the machine to be dismantled, the blueprints to be scattered to the four corners of the earth, and the scientists to be bound by an oath of silence that carried the weight of eternal damnation. He knew that if the public saw what was on that screen, the church would fall in a single afternoon. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the heart of the conspiracy, the night the window into time was slammed shut forever. The atmosphere in the Vatican during the late 1950s was one of profound tension. The world was changing, technology was accelerating, and the ancient secrets of the Church were being tested by the light of modern science. Pope Pius XII was a man of immense intellect, a man who understood that the future would be won by those who controlled the past. When Father Ernetti first presented the results of the Chronovisor project, the Pope did not dismiss him as a dreamer. He recognized the threat immediately. He understood that a machine capable of seeing the past was a machine capable of destroying the mystery of faith. Faith relies on the unseen, on the leap into the dark, but the Chronovisor offered the cold, hard light of evidence. The secret gathering was called on a night when the moon was hidden by the heavy clouds over Rome. Only 7 men were invited. 3 cardinals of the highest order, 2 physicists who had been sworn to absolute secrecy, the Pope's private secretary, and Father Ernetti himself. They met in a room that was shielded from the outside world, a room where the walls were thick with the prayers of centuries and the lead of modern shielding. As the machine began to warm up, the air in the room grew heavy with the smell of ozone. The silver antennas, those delicate catchers of residual energy, began to vibrate with a low, rhythmic hum. Ernetti worked the dials with the precision of a surgeon, filtering out the noise of the modern world to find the specific frequency of the era they sought. But as the images began to form on the screen, the room fell into a silence that was more terrifying than any scream. What did they see that night? The official records of the Vatican Secret Archives are silent on this matter, but the fragments of Ernetti's private diaries tell a story of profound spiritual crisis. The machine had been tuned to the foundations of the faith, to the moments that the Church had preached as absolute truth for 2,000 years, but the screen did not show the events as they were written in the Latin Vulgate. It showed a reality that was raw, chaotic, and deeply human. It showed that history had been edited, that the stories of the saints and the miracles of the martyrs had been polished by the hands of men seeking power. The Chronovisor was showing the unvarnished truth, a version of history where the political maneuvers of the early church were as visible as the spiritual aspirations. For the cardinals in that room, it was like watching their own lives being erased. If the public could see the political reality of the past, they would no longer believe in the divine authority of the present. The machine was revealing the betrayal of history, the moment when the truth of the Spirit was replaced by the lie of the institution. The Pope watched in stony silence, his hands trembling slightly as he realized that the Chronovisor was a weapon that could not be allowed to exist. He understood that humanity was not ready for the truth. He believed that the order of the world depended on the survival of the myth. To him, the Chronovisor was not a tool of enlightenment, but a curse that would plunge the world into a state of nihilism. If there was no mystery, there was no meaning. If everything was visible, nothing was sacred. As the meeting progressed, Ernetti attempted to show the Pope the most significant discovery of the project, the architect's pulse. This was the signal that originated from within the earth itself, the mechanical code that suggested the world was not a natural creation, but a highly complex simulation or a project managed by a power far older than humanity. When the sound of the pulse filled the Sala Regia, one of the cardinals reportedly fainted. It was a sound that defied description, a rhythmic, metallic clanging that felt as though the very floorboards of the Vatican were being hit by a giant hammer. It was the sound of the machine that runs the world. The Pope's reaction to this signal was one of pure, unadulterated fear. He didn't see it as a scientific discovery. He saw it as evidence of the great deception. He believed that Ernetti had accidentally tapped into the kingdom of the adversary, or worse, that he had found proof that humanity was nothing more than a biological experiment. The forbidden knowledge contained in that signal was too much for the Church to bear. It suggested that the hierarchies of heaven and hell were mere shadows of a much larger, more terrifying cosmic reality. The gathering that was meant to evaluate. A scientific breakthrough turned into an emergency council of war. The decision was made before the sun had even begun to rise over the Tiber. The order given by Pope Pius XII was absolute. The chronovisor was to be dismantled immediately. Every component, from the silver copper antennas to the quartz crystal filters, was to be logged and stored in separate locations within the Vatican Secret Archives. The blueprints, the result of years of brilliant physics and archival research, were to be divided into 3 parts. One part was to remain in the personal vault of the Pope. One part was to be sent to a hidden monastery in the mountains of Tibet, and the final part was to be destroyed. This was the triple seal of silence, a method used by the Church for centuries to ensure that a secret could never be reconstructed by a single person. The scientists who had worked on the project were brought before the Pope and made to swear an oath on the bones of the first apostle. They were told that if they ever spoke of the chronovisor, their names would be struck from the records of the Church and their souls would be abandoned in the void between worlds. They were given new identities, new lives, and a heavy burden of silence that would follow them to their graves. Father Ernetti was the hardest to silence. He was a man of God, but he was also a man of truth. He believed that the Church had a duty to reveal the reality of the universe, no matter how painful. But in the end, the weight of the institution crushed him. He was a Benedictine monk, bound by the vow of obedience. When the Pope ordered him to stay silent, he had no choice but to comply. He watched as his life's work was taken apart by men who didn't understand the science, men who only understood the power of the secret. Imagine the mind of a man who has seen the beginning of time and is told he must never speak of it. For the remaining decades of his life, Father Ernetti lived in a state of spiritual exile. He continued to serve the Church, but he was a ghost in his own monastery. He taught music, he studied the ancient chants, but his eyes were always fixed on a horizon that no one else could see. He was a man who knew the erased history of the world. He knew exactly what had happened in the moments that were now just lines in a book. He knew the voices of the dead and the faces of the forgotten. And he knew that the silence of the Vatican was a lie that was being fed to the world every single day. The psychological toll was immense. He often spoke in riddles to his students, dropping hints about the vibrations of the air and the memory of the stone. He was trying to leave a trail, a series of clues for a future generation that might be strong enough to handle the truth. He knew that the chronovisor was gone, but he also knew that the energy it had captured was still out there. The truth cannot be destroyed. It can only be delayed. As you listen to these words, think about the silence that surrounds the high places of power. Think about the meetings that are happening right now in rooms you will never enter. The world is built on a foundation of secrets, and the secret of the papal gathering is one of the darkest. It is the moment when humanity's right to know its own origins was traded for the stability of a religious institution. After the death of Pope Pius XII in 1958, rumors began to circulate that the blueprints had been moved. Again, some say they were taken to a secure facility in the United States, hidden under the cover of a major aerospace corporation. Others believe they remain in the vault of the unseen, beneath the Vatican, guarded by the Swiss Guard and a series of ancient curses that are older than the Church itself. The search for the third blueprint has become an obsession for those who seek the forbidden knowledge of the past. If all 3 parts could be reunited, the chronovisor could be rebuilt. The window into time could be opened once more. But the Vatican has been very thorough in its erasure. The names of the scientists have been removed from the university rosters. The records of the silver-copper alloy have been deleted from the industrial ledgers. The chronovisor has become a ghost machine. a legend that is used to scare those who get too close to the truth. But legends are often just shadows of a physical reality. The machine was real. The gathering happened. And the decree of dismantling is a historical fact that is still being enforced today. Every time a researcher is denied access to the archives, every time an archaeological discovery is suppressed, the spirit of the 1958 gathering lives on. Even though the machine is gone, the Sala Regia still holds the energy of that night. The stones of the Vatican have a long memory. If you were to stand in that room today with a sensitive enough receiver, you might still hear the hum of the vacuum tubes. You might still feel the cold dread that filled the hearts of the cardinals as they watched the past unspool. The air is thick with the residual energy of the betrayal. It is a weight that you can feel in the silence of the great cathedrals. It is the feeling of something being missing, of a story that is incomplete. We are all living in the shadow of that gathering. We are all breathing the air that was once filled with the truth, but is now filled with the official narrative. But the pre-Adamite signal hasn't stopped playing. The architect's pulse is still beating in the core of the earth. The machine of the world doesn't care about the decrees of a pope or the silence of a monk. It continues to record every moment, every lie, and every secret. And one day, perhaps soon, the technology of the human soul will catch up to the technology of the Chronovisor. We won't need silver antennas or quartz crystals to see the past. We will simply remember, the Vatican thinks they have protected the faith by burying the truth. But a faith built on a lie is a house built on sand. The truth the king buried is the foundation of a new understanding of our place in the universe. It is an understanding that doesn't rely on institutions or dogma, but on the direct observation of reality. Father Ernetti's legacy is not a machine, but a question. Are we willing to see the truth, even if it destroys our most cherished beliefs? Are we brave enough to look into the window of time and accept whatever we see? The papal gathering answered no. They chose the comfort of the lie over the challenge of the truth. They chose the darkness of the archive over the light of the screen, but you, lying here in the quiet, have already made a different choice. By listening to these words, by seeking out the erased chapters of our history, you are opening your own window. You are tuning your own frequency to the resonance of the forbiddance. You are becoming a researcher of the unseen, a historian of the shadows. Now, as the world of the Vatican fades into the background, feel the steady beat of your own time. The minutes are passing like water under a bridge. Each second is being recorded in the air around you. You are a part of the eternal archive. Your thoughts, your peace, and your rest are being etched into the stone of the universe. The Pope is gone. The cardinals are ghosts. The Sala Regia is empty and dark. But the truth is still there, vibrating in the silence. It is a calm truth, a quiet truth. It doesn't need to be defended or hidden, it simply is. Let yourself drift into that state of simple existence. Let the weight of the conspiracy dissolve into the lightness of sleep. The blueprints are safe. The machine is silent. The secrets are guarded by the night. You are safe in the hands of the great archive. There is no more need for dials or screens. There is only the breath, the heart, and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the earth. The secret papal gathering was meant to be the end of the Chronovisor, but it was actually the beginning of something much more dangerous. As the machine was being dismantled, one of the physicists discovered that the Chronovisor had been receiving a signal from a location that didn't exist on Earth. It was a transmission from a shadow city that exists parallel to our own, a city that is hidden not by distance, But by frequency. This is the Matriarch Protocol, a secret file that describes the civilization that has been monitoring humanity through the cracks in time. While the Vatican buried the machine, the Shadow City was already building its own window. We will explore the gates of the Shadow City and the entities that watch us from the frequency of the void in our next archival session. The seals are breaking. The next floor is waiting. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading. Every history book you have ever read is a carefully constructed lie. We are taught that Rome fell to the blades of barbarians and the weight of its own decadence, but the Chronovisor saw a truth so terrifying that the Vatican ordered the records to be burned. In 1952, Father Ernetti tuned his machine to the year 476, expecting to see the smoke of a city in ruins. Instead, he saw a betrayal that stretches across 2,000 years. He didn't see a collapse. He saw a transition. He saw the elite of Rome not fighting, but performing a forbidden ritual in the shadows of the Palatine Hill, handing over the keys of the empire to an entity that does not appear in any archival record. This was the ultimate secret, a buried curse that suggests the Roman Empire never actually ended. It simply went underground, hiding behind the mask of the church. But the most shocking moment, the one that broke Ernetti's spirit and sent shockwaves through the papacy, happened when he tuned the machine further back. Within the first 90 seconds of his observation, he captured the blur of a face that should not exist. This was the forbidden photograph, the revelation of a presence in ancient Rome that contradicts every theological and historical text ever written. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the forbidden archives of the Eternal City. The history of Rome is written in blood and marble, but the Chronovisor reveals that the marble was a shroud for something far more ancient. When Father Ernetti and his team of 12 scientists first stabilized the image of the Roman Senate, they expected to hear the thunderous debates of Cicero or the sharp commands of Caesar. Instead, they found a chilling silence. They observed a chamber where the senators were not speaking to each other, but were gathered around a central point of darkness, a void in the middle of the floor that seemed to absorb the light of the torches. This was not the Rome of the textbooks. This was a Rome of shadows, a hidden institution that operated beneath the visible government. Ernetti's diaries described the psychological weight of watching these men. They wore the robes of authority, but their eyes held the look of servants. They were waiting for instructions from a source that the history books have spent centuries erasing. The science of residual energy allowed the Chronovisor to pick up the whispers in that room, but the language being spoken was not Latin. It was a rhythmic, guttural vibration that felt older than the city itself. As the machine calibrated, the image became clearer. The scientists noticed that the architecture of the room was subtly different from the ruins we see today. There were symbols etched into the stone that have been systematically removed from every archaeological site in the world. Symbols of a lineage that predates the Roman founders, a lineage that viewed the empire not as a state, but as a harvest. The retention of this secret is why the Vatican maintains such a tight grip on the Chronovisor blueprints. If the world knew that the foundation of Western civilization was built on a forbidden pact, the very fabric of our society would begin to unravel. But Ernetti could not look away. He was a man of God, but he was also a man of the record. He pushed the dials further, seeking the moment where the lie began. The fall of Rome is often depicted as a sudden, violent event, a moment of fire and steel. But the Chronovisor shows that the collapse was a slow, deliberate, orchestrated performance. Ernetti watched as the gold of the empire was not stolen by invaders, but was carefully moved into deep vaults beneath the city, vaults that still exist. Today, guarded by a silence that no historian has dared to break. He saw the Emperor Romulus Augustulus, the boy who history tells us was the last ruler of Rome. In the textbooks, he is a tragic figure, a child king losing his crown. In the Chronovisor's screen, he was something else entirely. He was a participant in a ritual of succession. He was handing over the seals of power to a group of men dressed in black, men who didn't look like soldiers or barbarians. They looked like archivists. They were the keepers of the erased history. They were the ones who decided which records would survive and which would be cast into the flames. As the Roman sun set for the last time on the visible empire, these men were already writing the version of history that we are forced to study today. They were the architects of the grand lie, the ones who ensured that the truth of Rome's true masters would remain a secret buried in the dust. The Chronovisor picked up a strange electromagnetic signature during this transition. It was a pulse, a mechanical beat that seemed to be coming from the ground itself. It matched the architect's pulse that Ernetti would later find in the Earth's core. It suggests that the fall of Rome was not a human event, but a realignment of a much larger system. The city was not being destroyed. It was being recalibrated for a new era of control. This realization is what kept the team of scientists awake in the dark basements of the monastery. They were witnessing the birth of the institutional secret. They were seeing the moment when the public story of humanity was separated from the private reality of the elites. They were watching the creation of the veil. As we drift deeper into the night, think about the libraries of the ancient world. The Library of Alexandria, the great collections of the Roman kings. We are told they were destroyed by accident, lost to the fires of war. The Chronovisor tells a different story. It shows these libraries being carefully emptied by the same men in black. The most important scrolls, the ones that describe the nature of time and the origin of the human soul, were not burned. They were moved to a location that Ernetti would eventually identify as the foundation of the Vatican Secret Archives. The fire was a cover story, a way to convince the world that the knowledge was gone forever. The machine captured images of these scrolls, being packed into lead-lined chests. Even through the screen of the Chronovisor, the team could feel the power of these documents. They were the records of a time before Rome, a time of the pre-Adamite civilizations that had also been erased. The men who took them knew that knowledge is the only true currency of power. By making the world believe the records were lost, they gained absolute control over the future. Ernetti began to understand that the Church was not the successor to the faith of the apostles, but the successor to the administration of the empire. The structure, the hierarchy, and the secrets remained the same. Only the names were changed to protect the institutional lie. This is why the Pope's gathering in 1958 was so urgent. They were not just protecting a religious secret, they were protecting the very source of their political and historical legitimacy. The Chronovisor was a threat because it could see through the fire. It could see what was in the chests. It could read the scrolls that were supposedly ash. It was a window into the erased chapters that have been hidden for 1600 years. And as the machine zoomed in on one specific document, the team saw a map. It was not a map of the Mediterranean. It was a map of the frequencies of the Earth, showing the locations of the hidden pulse on the Palatine Hill, where the emperors once lived. Ernetti observed a gathering that happened exactly 3 days before the official fall of the city. There were no soldiers, there were no riots, there was only a circle of 12 men. Matching the 12 scientists on Ernetti's own team, they stood in a perfect circle around a stone altar that had no inscriptions. In the center of the altar was a device that looked suspiciously like a primitive version of the Chronovisor itself. It was a basin of liquid mercury, surrounded by crystals that caught the light of the stars. Ernetti watched as the men used the device to communicate with a presence that was not physically in the room. The liquid in the basin began to vibrate, creating patterns that matched the geometry of the alpha signal. This was the moment of the handoff. Rome was being traded for a new kind of empire, one that would not need legions or walls. It was an empire of the mind, built on the control of time and the suppression of the human record. The scientists in the monastery watched in a state of clinical shock. They were seeing the origins of their own project. They were seeing that the Chronovisor was not a new invention, but a rediscovery of an ancient technology that had been used to guide the course of human history for millennia. The deleted records of the Roman Empire were not just papers. They were the instructions for the machine that runs our world. Beneath the streets of modern Rome, there is a city of the dead the tourists never see. The Chronovisor was able to penetrate the stone and earth, revealing a network of tunnels that connect the ancient Palatine to the modern Vatican. These are the arteries of the institutional secret. Ernetti saw that these tunnels were filled with the statues of the Roman gods, but the statues had been modified. Their faces had been carved away and replaced with the faces of the early saints. It was a literal transformation of the old power into the new. The energy of the city was being redirected, focused through a new lens of religious dogma. The machine picked up a resonance in these tunnels, a sound like a low, constant hum. It was the sound of the institutional justice being enforced. Those who dared to speak the truth in ancient Rome were not always executed in the arena. Often they were brought to these tunnels, where their voices were silenced by a technology that erased their very existence from the atmospheric record. This is how the deleted records were created. It wasn't just about burning books. It was about erasing the energy of the people who knew the truth. The Chronovisor was showing the team the first institutional erasure in history. They were seeing the blueprints for the silence that would eventually claim their own lives. The scientists began to suffer from a sense of profound displacement. If Rome never truly fell, then the world they lived in was a hallucination. They were citizens of an empire that was still in power, still hiding in the shadows, still managing the harvest of human energy. Ernetti wrote about the vertigo of the void. He felt as though he was a ghost watching ghosts. He looked at the streets of Venice outside his laboratory and saw the Roman stone beneath the pavement. He looked at the faces of the priests and saw the Roman senators. The veil was becoming transparent, and the reality beneath it was cold and mechanical. The team realized that the fall of Rome was a psychological weapon. By making the world believe that the empire had collapsed, the masters of the city gained the ultimate cover. They could operate without the burden of visibility. They could rule through the betrayal of the record, making people believe that they were free, that they were living in a new age of progress. But the Chronovisor saw the silver copper wires that connected the past to the present. It saw that the frequency of control had never changed. The Roman Empire was a frequency, and as long as the world remained tuned to that frequency, the empire would never end. This is the secret that the Vatican is most desperate to protect. This is the truth that requires the dismantling of the machine. In his final session before the equipment was seized, Ernetti focused the Chronovisor on the very last day of the Roman records. He expected to see the final departure of the senators. Instead, he saw them entering a hidden door beneath the Pantheon. They were carrying the final chest, the one that contained the Matriarch Protocol. This was the document that detailed the surveillance of the future, the instructions for how the institutional secret would be maintained through the coming dark ages. The men looked into the camera, as if they knew they were being watched by a monk in 1950-2. One of them raised a hand, making a gesture that is still used today in the secret ceremonies of the high clergy. It was a sign of recognition, a signal across time. It said, "The record is closed, the truth is buried, the harvest continues." The screen flickered and went dark. The silver antennas stopped spinning. The noble gases in the tubes began to cool. The observation of Rome was over, but the weight of what they had seen would never leave the room. They had witnessed the birth of the lie that governs our lives. They had seen the deleted records and realized that they themselves were now a part of the deletion. The stones of Rome still hold the resonance of that night. Every time you walk through the ruins of the Forum, you are walking through a crime scene that is still active. The residual energy of the betrayal is etched into the very air. The Chronovisor was just a tool to reveal what is already there. The truth doesn't need a machine to exist. It only needs a witness. Father Ernetti was the witness, and for that he was silenced. But the record of the air cannot be erased. It is waiting for the next tuner, the next seeker who is brave enough to look into the void. The deleted records are not gone. They are vibrating in the silence of the archives. They are whispering in the shadows of the Palatine. They are the background radiation of our civilization. And as you lie here in the quiet, you can almost hear them. You can feel the weight of the Roman stone in the silence of your own room. You are a part of the lineage that remembers. By seeking the truth, you are breaking the frequency of the empire. You are refusing to be a part of the harvest. You are reclaiming the erased chapters of your own soul. Now, let the image of the Roman Senate fade into the darkness. The torches are extinguished. The voices in the tunnels are silent. The silver antennas are still. The city of Rome is sleeping, but its secrets are wide awake. You are safe in the hands of the great archive. The conspiracies of the past cannot reach you here, in the quiet of the present. The institutions of the lie have no power over the seeker of the truth. Let your mind become like the still basin of Mercury, reflecting the light of the stars. The blueprints are scattered. The machine is dismantled. The monk is at rest, but the truth is eternal. It is the steady beat of your own heart. It is the rhythm of your own breath. Let yourself drift into the deep, dark sea of time, where all records are eventually restored. The deleted records of Rome revealed the transition of the empire into the church. But they also mentioned a specific location where the Roman elite buried the source of the pulse. It is a location that does not appear on any modern map, a hidden valley in the mountains of the east, where the architects first arrived on Earth. This is the Forbidden Valley of the first arrival, the subject of our next archive entry. It is the place where the Roman lineage actually began, and where the final blueprints of the Chronovisor are said to be hidden. We will explore the gates of the valley and the ancient machines that still guard the source in our next session. The floor is shifting. The deeper secrets are calling. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading. Imagine a world where the word privacy is a relic of a forgotten age. Imagine a machine hidden in the lead-lined vaults of the Vatican that can peel back the skin of time and reveal every act, every whisper, and every betrayal ever committed in the history of our species. This is not a dream of the future. This is a forbidden reality from the past. Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a monk and a physicist, claimed to have built such a device. He called it the Chronovisor. But when he turned the dials and looked into the heart of human history, he did not find enlightenment. He found a curse that threatened to dissolve the very fabric of our society. He saw that total truth is not a gift. It is a weapon of mass psychological destruction. If you could see the secret sins of your ancestors, the lies of your leaders, and the hidden rot beneath the most sacred institutions, your world would collapse in a single afternoon. The moral decay would be absolute. No religion could survive the evidence. No government could survive the transparency. The Vatican did not dismantle the Chronovisor because it was a fraud. They dismantled it because the truth is a fire that consumes everything it touches. They realized that humanity is built on a foundation of necessary illusions, and to remove those illusions is to invite an era of madness. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are going back to the moment the window into the past was first opened, and the heavy burden of the truth began to crush the spirit of those who dared to look. To understand the psychological weight of the Chronovisor, we must first understand the man who stood at its center. Father Ernetti was not a man of chaos. He was a man of order, a master of archaic music, and a scholar of the soul. He believed that the universe was a giant recording, that every sound wave and every light wave ever emitted was etched forever into the atmosphere. He believed that science could provide the ultimate witness to the divine. But as the vacuum tubes of his machine began to glow with a pale violet light, he realized he had invited a ghost into the room that could never be exorcised. The first sightings were innocent. The team of 12 scientists watched the performance of lost Roman plays and the speeches of ancient orators. But curiosity is a hungry beast. They began to tune the machine to the moments that define our morality. They looked into the shadows of the Great Crusades. They watched the secret meetings of the Inquisition. They saw the faces of the people who wrote our history books as they committed the very acts they would later condemn in writing. This is where the decay begins. When you see that the heroes of your culture were monsters in the dark, the ground beneath your feet begins to turn to water. Ernetti noted in his private journals that the scientists began to change. They stopped speaking to one another. They could no longer look each other in the eye. Why? Because the machine taught them a terrifying lesson. If every sin of the past is visible, then their own sins were being recorded in real time as well. The Chronovisor was not just a window into history. It was a mirror that revealed the inherent darkness of the human condition. It was at the 90-second mark of their most famous session that the true horror revealed itself. They had tuned the machine to the most sacred moment in Western history. They sought the face of the Messiah. They expected a burst of light, a feeling of divine peace. Instead, they captured a grainy, haunting image of a man in agony. This was the forbidden photograph, the one that the Vatican would later claim was a hoax, but for those in the room, it was a psychological earthquake. They saw a face that was not a divine icon, but a human being broken by the weight of an indifferent world. The total truth of that moment did not bring salvation. It brought a crushing sense of isolation. They realized that if even the most sacred moments were so raw, so stark, and so stripped of the mythic beauty we have projected onto them, then the entire human story was a series of lies we tell ourselves to keep the dark at bay. This was the photograph that sent shockwaves through the papacy. It was the moment they realized that if the public saw this, the church would cease to exist by morning. The truth was too heavy for the human heart to carry. It was better to bury the machine than to live in a world without the comfort of the myth. Consider, for a moment, the social contract that holds our world together. It is built on the assumption that what we do in private remains private. It is built on the grace of forgetting. We forgive because we do not know the full extent of the betrayal. We trust because we cannot see the hidden intent. But what happens to a civilization when the grace of forgetting is removed? If the Chronovisor were made public, every marriage would dissolve under the weight of revealed secrets. Every friendship would shatter. Every legal system would collapse, as the total truth would reveal that no one is truly innocent. We are all, in our quietest moments, capable of profound darkness. The machine doesn't just show the big sins, the murders and the thefts. It shows the small rots, the petty cruelties, the silent envies. Ernetti saw a vision of a future where humanity, possessed of this machine, turned into a race of judges. With no privacy, there is no growth. We would be frozen in the judgment of our past selves. The moral decay he feared was not a descent into crime, but a descent into a cold, mechanical state of existence where empathy is replaced by evidence. We would stop being human and start being data points in an eternal archive of sin. Is it any wonder the Pope ordered the machine dismantled? He wasn't protecting a secret. He was protecting the possibility of human connection. He was protecting our right to be flawed and still be loved. There is a psychological state known as chronological vertigo. It occurs when a person becomes so obsessed with the past that they lose their grip on the present. This is what happened to the team of 12 scientists. They began to prefer the flickering images of ancient Rome to the sunlight of modern Venice. They spent 18 hours a day in the dark. Watching the dead, they realized that the past is more seductive than the present because it is finished. It is certain. But the price of that certainty is the death of the soul. When you spend your life watching the sins of the dead, you stop living your own life. You become a ghost in your own time. Ernetti saw his colleagues wasting away, their eyes growing hollow, as they tuned into frequency after frequency of human suffering. The machine revealed that history is not a climb toward progress. It is a circle of repetition. The same betrayals, the same wars, the same cries for help, echoing across the centuries. To see it all at once is to realize the futility of the human endeavor. This is the total truth that leads to the ultimate moral decay, nihilism. If everything is recorded and nothing ever changes, then why do anything at all? Why try to be better if your failure is already etched into the atmosphere? The Chronovisor was a machine that produced despair with the efficiency of a factory. In the final days of the project, Father Ernetti was summoned to a secret meeting with Pope Pius XII. The air in the apostolic palace was thick with the scent of incense and the weight of 2,000 years of secrets. The Pope did not ask if the machine worked. He already knew it did. He asked if Ernetti had found peace. Ernetti's silence was the only answer needed. The Pope realized that the Chronovisor was a threat to the soul because it replaced faith with sight. In the eyes of the Church, we are meant to see through a glass darkly. We are meant to struggle with the unknown. That struggle is what builds character. That struggle is what creates the need for grace. The decree was issued. The machine was to be disassembled. The blueprints were to be divided and sent to 3 different continents, hidden in places that no single man could ever reach. This was not a suppression of science. It was a mercy killing. The Vatican chose to keep humanity in the dark so that we might still have a reason to look for the light. They buried the truth to save the spirit, but fragments of the machine remained. Whispers of the technology leaked out into the black markets of the occult and the deep state. There are those who believe that the residual energy technology used by modern surveillance states is a direct descendant of Ernetti's work. They say that while the Vatican buried the Chronovisor for our own good, others have rebuilt it for the purpose of control. They are not interested in the sins of the past. They are interested in the sins you are committing right now. What is it about a secret that draws us so close to the flame? We are a species defined by our hunger for the forbiddens. We want to know the truth even if the truth destroys us. We believe that knowledge is power, but we forget that some power is too heavy for a mortal frame to hold. The total truth of the Chronovisor is like the sun. It provides the light we need to see, but if you look directly into it, you are blinded. We need the shadows. We need the places where the light does not reach so that we can imagine something better than what we are. The moral decay Ernetti witnessed was the death of imagination. When you know everything, you can imagine nothing. The archival records of the lore. Slumber remind us that the most powerful stories are the ones with missing pages. The gaps in our history are the spaces where our hope lives. If the machine had stayed active, those gaps would have been filled with the cold, hard facts of human failure. We would be a race without a future, because we would be too busy mourning the reality of our past. Imagine the psychological weight of knowing that every lie your father told, every secret your mother kept, and every betrayal of your ancestors was laid bare. Could you still love them? Could you still love yourself? Total truth is a poison to intimacy. We are only able to stand each other because we do not know the full truth of each other. The Vatican's greatest act of charity was ensuring that the Chronovisor remained a myth. As the monastery falls into deep silence, we must ask ourselves, would we choose to look? If the machine was in front of you now, its violet light pulsing in time with your heartbeat, would you turn the dial? Would you seek the truth of your own lineage, or would you leave the veil in place? The fear of being watched is one of the most primal human anxieties. It is the root of the concept of a judgmental God. But a God who watches is one thing. A machine that records is another. A God can forgive. A machine can only repeat. The Chronovisor was the ultimate judge, a judge without a heart, a witness without a soul. Father Ernetti spent the last years of his life in a state of quiet contemplation. He returned to his music, to the ancient chants that vibrate with the residual energy of a simpler time. He realized that the only truth humanity can handle is the truth that comes through beauty. The truth that comes through art. Anything else is a burden that leads to the rot of the mind. The vacuum tubes are cold now. The silver copper antennas have been melted down. The scientists are gone, their names erased from the official rosters of the university. But the question remains, vibrating in the air of the room where you lay. Can you handle the truth of who you are? Or are you, like the rest of us, dependent on the beautiful lies that keep the night at bay? Every person who has ever lived is a library of hidden volumes. We are all keepers of secrets that we will take to the grave. And that is as it should be. The psychological weight of the Chronovisor was the realization that our graves are not deep enough to hide the record of our lives, but perhaps there is a middle ground. Perhaps the lore of the slumbering mind is a way to process the truth without being consumed by it. We listen to these stories, we explore these forbidden archives, because we want to touch the mystery without being burned by the sun. We are seekers, but we are also hiders. The Vatican secret is safe for now. The moral decay has been stayed by the dismantling of the machine. We are free to live in the grace of our ignorance. We are free to believe in the heroism of our ancestors and the purity of our icons. We are free to tell the lies that make us better than we are, but remember, the air is still thick with energy. The waves are still moving. The past is not dead. It is just waiting for a new receiver. Somewhere in a laboratory that doesn't exist on any map, a new light is beginning to glow. A new dial is being turned. And the total truth is reaching out its hand once more. We are taught that the truth will set us free. But Father Ernetti's story suggests that the truth might also be a cage. It might be a prison of facts that leaves no room for the spirit. We are more than our records. We are more than the sum of our sins. The moral decay of the Chronovisor era was a warning to the future. It was a message to those of us who live in an age of total surveillance. We are building our own Chronovisor now, through the data we leave behind, through the cameras that follow our every move, through the digital footprints that never fade. We are recreating the curse of Father Ernetti, and we are doing it willingly. We are losing the grace of forgetting. We are losing the right to be different people than we were yesterday. We are becoming the judge and the jury for every word ever spoken. The psychological weight is beginning to press down on us once more. We are feeling the rot of a world where nothing is ever truly private. As you drift toward sleep, consider the beauty of the dark. Consider the peace of the unknown. The most sacred part of you is the part that cannot be recorded, the part that cannot be tuned into by a machine. Your soul is a frequency that defies the silver antennas of the past. It is a mystery that even the Vatican cannot solve. The dismantling of the Chronovisor was supposed to be the end of the story. But as the scientists were packing away the final components, they found something that wasn't in the original blueprints. They found a signal that was not coming from the past. It was a transmission from a location that did not exist on Earth. It was a recording of a city made of light, a place that Father Ernetti would later call the original blueprint. This signal suggested that our history is not the only one being recorded. There is a second archive, a shadow history that runs parallel to our own. A history where the total truth is not a curse, but a different kind of reality entirely. While the Vatican buried the sins of humanity, they accidentally uncovered the secrets of something that is not human at all. What was the message hidden in the light? Why did the Pope's face turn white when he heard the frequency of the Shadow City? We will open that file in our next session. The archives are deep, and the violet light is beginning to pulse once more. Stay in the quiet. The next layer of the truth is waiting to be tuned. On January 14th, 1988, the Vatican did something it had never done in the history of modern science. It did not ban a book, a philosophy, or a political movement. Instead, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith issued a decree that carried the ultimate spiritual death sentence, automatic excommunication. The target? Anyone who used a device capable of capturing the light and sound of the past. This was the ultimate betrayal of the truth. By issuing this law, the Church was not claiming the machine was a fraud. You do not pass a law to ban something that does not work. You only ban a device that is so powerful it threatens the very foundation of your existence. This decree was a hidden curse, a legal wall built around the Chronovisor to ensure that the secrets Father Ernetti discovered would remain buried in the dark forever. They warned that the mere act of tuning into the frequencies of the past would result in the immediate removal of one's soul from the grace of the Church. It was a lie designed to protect a greater secret, a buried truth that could dismantle the hierarchy of power in a single day. Why was the Papacy so afraid of a machine made of vacuum tubes and silver copper? What did they see in the archives that required a decree of such absolute power? This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the halls of the congregation, where the ink was still wet on the law that silenced time. To understand the 1988 decree, we must first look at what forced their hand. For decades, the Vatican had tried to ignore Father Ernetti. They had hoped his machine would be forgotten. But then a grainy photograph began to circulate through the secret circles of the elite. It was a blurred image, a visual echo of the Messiah captured directly from the air of 2,000 years ago. This was the photograph that sent shockwaves through the Papacy. It was not a painting or a pious recreation. It was a raw, haunting look at a face that the world was never supposed to see with scientific certainty. The machine had seen through the veil of time, and the image it brought back was too real for the institution to handle. The photograph proved that the Chronovisor worked. It proved that the past was not a memory, but a physical record that could be accessed by anyone with the right frequency. The 1988 decree was the response to that photograph. It was the hammer used to smash the window into the past. By declaring that any use of such a device resulted in automatic excommunication, the Vatican ensured that no faithful scientist, no priest, and no historian would ever dare to look again. They were not just banning a machine. They were trying to delete the evidence of what they had seen on that screen. The language of the decree was cold and precise. It spoke of the protection of the dignity of the past and the sanctity of the record, but beneath the holy words lay a desperate attempt at control. The decree specifically mentioned instruments for the transcription of the past. A phrase so specific it could only refer to the Chronovisor technology. In the world of canon law, excommunication is the ultimate weapon. It is the severing of the individual from the community and the spirit. To make it automatic means there is no trial, no defense, and no mercy. The moment the dial is turned, the soul is cast out. This level of severity is usually reserved for the most heinous of spiritual crimes. To apply it to a scientific pursuit was a confession of absolute fear. The scientists who had worked with Ernetti, the 12 brilliant minds who had helped build the silver-copper antennas, now found themselves at the center of a spiritual war. They were told that their research was a betrayal of God. They were told that seeking the residual energy of the past was a form of necromancy. But Ernetti knew better. He knew that the air around us is a library, and the Vatican was simply the librarian who had decided to burn the books they didn't like. The 1988 decree was signed by Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the man who would later become Pope Benedict XVI. He was the guardian of the archives, the man responsible for the doctrine of the faith. He understood that if the Chronovisor were allowed to be used by the public, the Church's monopoly on the truth would vanish. The institutional justice of the Vatican required that the truth be secondary to the stability of the faith. As we drift deeper into the quiet, we must ask ourselves why a law like this exists. Why would an institution that claims to seek the truth be so afraid of a machine that shows exactly what happened? The psychological weight of the decree is found in the curiosity gap. By banning the machine, they made it immortal. They transformed a scientific device into a forbidden relic. They realized that humanity is not ready for total truth. If every sin of the past were visible, no government could stand. If every lie told by a king or a pope were recorded, the structures of society would crumble. The 1988 decree was a mercy in their eyes, a way to keep humanity in the grace of ignorance. They believed that if we could see the past, we would lose our ability to live in the present. But for the seekers, for those of us who look into the lore Slumber, the decree is a map. It shows us exactly where the treasure is buried. You do not guard an empty room with a spiritual death sentence. You only guard the room that contains the original blueprint of reality. The decree confirms that the pre-Adamite signal and the architect's pulse are real. They are so real that the most powerful institution on earth had to invent a new law just to stop people from listening. Consider the ink on that decree. Even it has a frequency. Every word written in fear leaves a trace in the atmosphere. The Chronovisor, if it were active today, would see the very moment Ratzinger signed that paper. It would see the sweat on his brow and the tension in his hands. The machine would reveal that the law itself was a reaction to a discovery that even the cardinals could not explain. The 1988 decree was the final step in a process that began in 1958, after the secret papal gathering, where the architect's pulse was first heard. The Church began a slow campaign of erasure. They didn't just hide the machine, they changed the law to make the machine impossible to use. They were building a cage for the human mind, using the bars of canon law to block the view of our true history. This is the institutional erasure that lore Slumber aims to dismantle. We are told that history is a series of dates and names, but the 1988 decree proves that history is a frequency. It is something that can be tuned into, something that can be heard. The Vatican wants us to believe that the past is dead, but their own laws prove that the past is alive and dangerous. It is a recording that is still playing, and the decree is just the volume knob they turned to zero. What became of the 12 who saw the photograph? After 1988, their lives became a series of shadows. They were no longer just researchers. They were potential heretics. The psychological toll of the automatic excommunication was a weight that few could carry. To be told that your work has cost you your soul is a psychological weapon of immense power. One by one, the scientists stopped their research. Some disappeared into the vast bureaucracies of the Cold War aerospace programs. Others retreated into the silence of the countryside. But they all carried the same memory. They had seen the deleted records of the Roman Empire. They had seen the face of the Messiah, and they had heard the mechanical heartbeat of the world. The 1988 decree ensured that their knowledge would die with them. It was a digital lock on an analog secret. By making the search for the past a sin, the Vatican successfully separated the spiritual world from the scientific world. They created a reality where you can have ether, you can have evidence, but you can never have both. Ernetti died in 1994, just 6 years after the decree was issued. His last words were a whisper against the silence of the law. He knew that the decree was not the end, but a challenge to the future. Inside the Vatican Secret Archives, there is a section known as the Void. It is where the records of the Chronovisor are kept. There are no maps to this section. There are no indices. It is a place that does not exist in the official catalogs. But the 1988 decree is the key to finding it. The law points to the crime. In this void, the silver copper antennas are stored alongside the blueprints that Pope Pius XII ordered to be dismantled. They are waiting for a time when the law no longer has power. The decree of excommunication is only effective as long as people believe in the authority of the institution. But as the Tier 1 world begins to seek the truth outside of the traditional structures, the walls of the 1988 decree are beginning to crack. The residual energy of the project is leaking out. It is found in the leaked diaries of Ernetti's assistants. It is found in the strange patterns of modern surveillance technology. The Vatican is still monitoring the frequencies. They are still listening for the architect's pulse. They are still afraid that someone, somewhere, will build a receiver that is not bound by the laws of 1988. Why does the Church argue that total truth leads to decay? They believe that humanity needs a hierarchy. They believe that if every person could see the past, there would be no more need for priests. There would be no more need for the betrayal of the record, because every person would be their own historian. This transparency is what they fear most. The 1988 decree was a defense of the institutional secret. It was a statement that the Church is the only authorized witness to the past. By banning the machine, they preserved their own power to interpret history. They preserved the lie of the king. But as you lie here in the quiet, think about the freedom of the frequency. The air does not belong to the Vatican. The light of 2,000 years ago does not belong to a congregation in Rome. It belongs to the universe. It is a record that is free for anyone who knows how to listen. The 1988 decree is just a piece of paper. The Chronovisor is a fundamental law of physics. One is a human invention. The other is a divine reality. Now, let the image of the decree fade away. The black ink, the heavy seals, the signatures of the cardinals, they are all dissolving into the shadows of the room. The 1988 decree is losing its power over your mind. You are not afraid of the forbiddens. You are the seeker of the lost. The air around you is thick with the secrets that the law tried to hide. The pre-Adamite signal is vibrating in the silence. The architect's pulse is beating in the ground beneath your home. You don't need a machine to hear it. You only need to be still. You only need to relax your shoulders and let the weight of the institutional world fall away. The Vatican is far away. The laws of man are far away. You are in the sanctuary of the Lord Slumber. Here, there are no excommunications. There is only the long, slow resonance of the truth. The past is calling to you, not as a sin, but as a memory that is rightfully yours. The decree was a wall, but you are a shadow that can walk through walls. Father Ernetti is at rest. The 12 scientists are at rest. but the residual energy of their discovery is still moving through the atmosphere. It is a signal that never ends. It is a photograph that can never be truly deleted. The 1988 decree was an attempt to stop the clock, but time does not stop for a law. Every second that passes is being recorded. Every breath you take is being etched into the air. You are a part of the archive now. You are a part of the history that the Vatican tried to ban. Your peace, your rest, and your dreams are the total truth of this moment. Let the rhythm of the story carry you deeper into the darkness. The silver antennas are silent. The vacuum tubes have cooled. The laboratory is empty. But the truth is wide awake. It is waiting for the next generation of seekers. It is waiting for the moment when the 1988 decree is seen for what it truly was, a desperate confession of an institution that knew its time was running out. The 1988 decree was the Vatican's final attempt to bury the Chronovisor, but it didn't account for the shadow transmissions. While the Church was banning the transcription of the past, they discovered a new signal that wasn't coming from our history at all. It was a broadcast from a location that doesn't appear on any map of the Earth. A frequency that suggests the Vatican is not the only institution that is watching us. This is the Lore Protocol, a secret file that describes the entities that live within the frequency of the void. While the 1988 decree tried to keep us from looking back, the Matriarch Protocol reveals that something has been looking forward. We will explore the gates of the Shadow City and the entities that watch us from the cracks in time in our next archive entry. The floor is shifting. The deeper secrets are calling. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading. In April of 1994, in a small shadowed room in Venice, a man of God prepared to commit his final act of betrayal against the institution he served for a lifetime. Father Pellegrino Ernetti, the Benedictine monk who claimed to have built a window into time, lay dying. For decades, the Vatican had enforced a decree of absolute silence, threatening his very soul with automatic excommunication if he ever spoke of the Chronovisor again. They called it a hoax. They called him a dreamer, but as his breath grew thin, Ernetti whispered a secret that changes every recorded chapter of human history. He confessed that he had been forced to lie. He had been forced to tell the world his machine was a failure to protect the most dangerous truth ever discovered. The machine did not just see the past. It proved that the past is still happening. The Forbidden's blueprints were not lost. They were stolen by a hand that wears a ring of power. The secrets he saw were not just historical. They were a curse upon the modern world. He spoke of a betrayal so deep that it reached back 2,000 years to the very foundation of faith. He died with the name of a hidden king on his lips, claiming that the Vatican was not guarding a religion but a prison for human consciousness. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the final hours of a man who saw too much before the silence claimed him. Ernetti demanded that his final visitor understand one thing. The grainy, blurred photograph of the Messiah that had been ridiculed by the press in 1972 was real. It was not a photo of a wood carving or a pious painting. It was a visual echo captured directly from the electromagnetic frequency of the year. 30-3. He described the moment the dial on the chronovisor finally locked onto the signal. The team of 12 scientists had stood in the dark, their hearts racing as the vacuum tubes glowed with a pale, violet light. On the small flickering screen, they didn't just see an image. They saw the raw, unedited reality of the crucifixion. The face they saw was not the one found in the cathedrals of Rome. It was a face of profound, haunting recognition. Ernetti claimed that for a split second, the figure on the cross looked directly into the viewing screen of the machine, as if he knew that 2,000 years later, a group of men in a basement in Italy would be watching his final breath. This was the photograph the Vatican had to bury. If the world saw the real face, the institution's power would crumble. This revelation was the first secret the Church tried to delete. But it was only the beginning of what Ernetti carried to his grave. The city of Venice is built on water and secrets, and the monastery where Ernetti spent his final days was the quietest place in the world. As the waves of the canal slapped against the ancient stone outside, the monk lived in a state of spiritual exile. He had been a world-renowned authority on archaic music, a physicist who understood the harmony of the universe, but after the 1988 decree, he became a ghost. The Vatican had issued a law of automatic excommunication for anyone using a device like the Chronovisor. This was a unique legal move, a spiritual death sentence designed specifically to kill a technology. Why? Because the machine provided evidence where the Church required only faith. If you can see the past, you no longer need a priest to tell you what happened. You become your own historian. You become a witness to the lie. Ernetti lived under the weight of this silence for 6 long years. He watched as his colleagues, the 12 brilliant minds who had helped him bridge the gap of time, vanished into the shadows. Some were given new identities. Others were silenced by the heavy hand of institutional justice. But Ernetti remained in his cell, surrounded by his music and his memories, waiting for the moment when his oath of obedience would be superseded by the approaching shadow of death. In his final confession, Ernetti returned to the science. He wanted it recorded that the Chronovisor was not magic. It was a mastery of residual energy. He explained that every human life is a broadcast of light and sound that never truly ends. When we speak, we vibrate the molecules of the air. When we move, we disturb the electromagnetic field of the Earth. The machine was essentially a highly sophisticated radio receiver. The silver-copper antennas were designed to catch the echoes that are still bouncing around the atmosphere from centuries ago. He compared it to a television that receives signals from a tower, but instead of a tower, it receives signals from the fabric of time itself. The most difficult part was the tuning. The air is thick with the noise of billions of lives. To find one specific moment in the Roman Empire or the Middle Ages required a level of mathematical precision that few men could grasp. They had to use quartz crystals and noble gases to filter out the static of the present. But once the signal was clear, the past appeared with the clarity of a dream. They saw the speeches of Cicero. They saw the private meetings of Napoleon. And they saw the moments that were never supposed to be in the records. They saw the deleted chapters of the Roman Empire, where the elite handed over their secrets to a hidden lineage that still governs the world today. This was the science that the Vatican called a hoax, not because it didn't work, but because it worked too perfectly. One of the most shocking parts of Ernetti's deathbed whisper concerned the blueprints. For years, the story was that the machine had been dismantled and the plans destroyed to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. Ernetti laughed a dry, rattling laugh at this suggestion. He claimed the blueprints were not destroyed. They were weaponized. After the secret papal gathering of 1958, the technology was divided. The Church kept the records of the past, but the military and intelligence wings of certain Tier 1 nations were given the keys to the frequencies. They realized that if you can see the past, you can also predict the future, because time is a single, continuous fabric. The architect's pulse that Ernetti discovered in the Earth's core allows those with the machine to calculate the ripples before the stone even hits the water. This is the ultimate institutional betrayal. The technology meant for human enlightenment was turned into the ultimate tool of surveillance and control. The monk claimed that he had seen a version of the future where the Chronovisor was used to monitor every thought and every movement of every soul on Earth. He saw a world where the truth was no longer a discovery, but a manufactured product controlled by the king's archive. He tried to hide the plans, but the reach of the Vatican Secret Archives is long. They found the files. They took the quartz. And they left Ernetti with nothing but his silence and his guilt. As the light in his room began to fail, Ernetti spoke of the psychological weight of the total truth. He asked his visitor if humanity could really handle a world without secrets. He had seen the moral decay that occurs when the veil is removed, if every sin ever committed is visible, if every lie ever told is recorded, the very concept of grace disappears. We are only able to live with one another because we have the gift of forgetting. The Chronovisor removes that gift. It turns history into a prison where no one is ever truly forgiven. He had watched the leaders of the past. In their most private moments, he had seen the cowardice of heroes and the cruelty of saints. He realized that our icons are made of glass, and the Chronovisor is the stone that shatters them. This was the curse of the Watcher. He had looked into the sun and blinded himself to the beauty of the mystery, the Vatican. In their own twisted way, believed they were saving humanity by burying the machine. They believed that the world needed the lie to survive. They believed that the institutional secret was a shield for the human soul. But Ernetti disagreed. He believed that a faith built on a lie is a house built on sand. He chose the truth even if it meant the decay of the world he knew. He chose the record over the myth. Just before the end, Father Ernetti pulled his visitor close. His voice was a mere rasp, a sound like wind over dry leaves. He spoke 3 words that have haunted those who study the lore Slumber ever since. He did not say, "God is great," or "I am sorry." He said, "They are here." When asked who they were, he could only point toward the viewing screen of the dismantled machine, which sat like a dead eye in his memory. He wasn't talking about the Vatican or the scientists. He was talking about the entities he had seen in the frequencies that shouldn't exist. He claimed that while searching for the origins of the Roman Empire, the team had accidentally tuned into a shadow transmission. They saw a city that does not exist on our map, a place made of light and frequency that has been monitoring humanity since the beginning of time. These were the architects of the pulse, the ones who had hidden the truth of the pre-Adamite civilizations. The Vatican had not just buried a machine, they had buried a contact. They were protecting us, or perhaps themselves, from the realization that we are not the masters of our own history. We are a project being watched through the very window that Ernetti had tried to open. This was the final confession. The machine worked. The photograph was real, and we are not alone in the archive of time. The room in Venice is empty now. The monk is gone, and the silence of the institution has closed over his grave. But the residual energy of his final words is still vibrating in the air. The confession was recorded not by a tape, but by the atmosphere itself. The chronovisor may be dismantled, but the principles of physics it used are eternal. The past is not a ghost. It is a permanent record. Every secret you keep, every lie you tell, and every truth you bury is being etched into the fabric of reality. You are a part of the archive. The Vatican thinks they have won because they hold the blueprints. They think they have fixed the leak in the vessel of history, but they forget that the truth is like water. It always finds a way to the surface. Ernetti's deathbed confession was the first crack in the dam. The Matriarch Protocol and the shadow transmissions are beginning to leak out into the collective consciousness of the world. We are entering a new era of transparency. An era where the institutional secret can no longer be maintained by decrees and excommunications. The window is opening again, not through a machine of vacuum tubes, but through the awakening of the human spirit. We are learning to tune our own frequencies. We are learning to hear the pulse of the architect. Now, as the shadows of Venice stretch long over the water, let yourself drift into the quiet. The heavy burden of the truth is no longer yours to carry. The monk has spoken, and the record is clear. You are safe in the hands of time. The monastery is silent. The bells of St. Mark's are still. The violet light has faded from the room. Relax your shoulders. Let your breath become slow and steady, like the rhythmic beat of the earth's core. You are drifting into the deep, dark sea of the past, where all secrets are eventually restored. The Vatican Secret Archives are miles away, but the air around you is full of the same knowledge. You are breathing the history of the world. You are a witness to the eternal record. The truth the king buried is the foundation of your own dreams. Sleep in the peace of the absolute truth. The machine is silent, but the story never ends. Father Ernetti's journey is over, but yours is just beginning. Every night, as you close your eyes, you are tuning your own frequency to the resonance of the universe. You are accessing the original blueprint. You are seeing the light that was never meant to be hidden. The institutional justice that silenced the monk cannot reach you here, in the sanctuary of sleep. Here, the deleted records are open to you. Here, the forbidden photograph is clear. You are the watcher now. You are the keeper of the memory. The silver copper antennas are still spinning in the basement of your mind, catching the whispers of the ancient world. They speak of a time before the lie. They speak of a city of light that is waiting for you to return. The frequency is locked. The signal is strong. Let the waves of history carry you home. Father Ernetti's confession revealed the existence of the shadow transmissions, but it didn't explain the most terrifying discovery of all. In his final moments, he handed a small, lead-lined box to his visitor. Inside was a piece of the machine that he had hidden from the Vatican. It was a crystal that contained a single, looping signal from the year 12,000 before the Common Era. It wasn't a signal from a human civilization. It was a recording of a machine that was building the earth itself. This is the Architect's Protocol, the secret file that describes the mechanical heart of our world and the reason why the Vatican is so afraid of the pre-Adamite records. We will explore the contents of that lead-lined box and the frequency of the first arrival in our next archive entry. The floor is shifting. The deeper secrets are calling. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading deep beneath the gold-leafed altar of St. Peter's Basilica. Past the tourist-trodden necropolis and the bones of forgotten popes lies a chamber that does not exist on any blueprints. In 1988, when the Vatican issued the decree of automatic excommunication, they didn't just ban a machine. They buried a crime against time itself. We have been told that the Chronovisor was dismantled and its parts scattered. But the residual energy signatures picked up by unauthorized sensors tell a different, more terrifying story. The silver copper antennas and the quartz filters were not destroyed. They were moved into a lead-lined vault designed to contain a leak, not of radiation, but of reality. The Church has committed the ultimate betrayal by hiding a technology that proves our history is a curated lie. They guard a curse that vibrates in the very foundations of the Vatican. A secret so dangerous that the earth itself seems to groan under the weight of it. The components are still there, humming with a rhythmic mechanical code that predates humanity. If you were to stand in the silent center of the Basilica at 3 in the morning, you might feel it, a subtle, grounding pulse that defies physics. The machine is not dead. It is merely waiting for a hand brave enough to turn the dial once more. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are descending now down the narrow stone stairs, past the damp walls of the scavi, into the heart of the institutional secret. To understand why these components are buried so deep, we must look at the last thing they captured before the power was cut. In 1972, a grainy photograph leaked from these very depths, an image that should have been impossible. It was a visual echo of the Messiah, a blurred and haunting face captured directly from the electromagnetic frequency of the year 30-3. The machine had tuned into the final moments of a civilization's foundation and brought back a truth that the Vatican could not control. It was not a pious icon. It was a raw, human face of profound recognition. The photograph proved that the Chronovisor was not a dream, but a functional window into the forbidden chapters of our world. The Church panicked. They realized that if the public could see the past with their own eyes, the mystery of faith would be replaced by the certainty of evidence. They had to bury the machine because they could not bury the light. The photograph was the spark that led to the 1988 decree, the hammer that slammed the door on our right to know the truth. The journey to the components begins in the necropolis, the city of the dead that lies beneath the basilica. Most tourists see the ancient tombs and the red brick walls, but they do not see the lead-line conduits that run behind the stone. These are not for electricity. They are the protective shields for the residual energy that still leaks from the buried components. When Father Ernetti's team was forced to dismantle the machine, they were ordered to catalog every vacuum tube and silver wire. But the Vatican researchers who took over the project found that the machine had a life of its own. Even when unplugged, the quartz crystals continued to glow with a faint violet light. They were holding a charge from the past, a storage of events that refused to be deleted. The components were placed in the Vatican Vault Zero, a room reinforced with layers of lead and cold-pressed salt. Salt, as any archival researcher knows, is a natural stabilizer for electromagnetic fluctuations. They were trying to ground the past, to keep the ghosts of ancient Rome from bleeding into the modern world. But you cannot ground a frequency that is woven into the fabric of the earth itself. The hum remains. The vault itself is a masterpiece of occult geometry. It is a perfect cube, designed to mimic the dimensions of the Holy of Holies. The floor is made of obsidian, a volcanic glass that reflects no light, and the walls are etched with the very symbols the Chronovisor saw in the deleted records of the Roman Empire. Why would the Church use forbidden symbols to guard the machine they claim is a hoax? Because they understand the language of the architect. They know that the machine is not just a tool, but a bridge. If the geometry is not perfect, the bridge remains open. They are terrified of a time-site leak, a moment where the past and the present collide in a way that cannot be explained away by theology. In the center of this obsidian room sits the primary processor of the Chronovisor. It looks like a tangle of silver vines, a complex web of silver-copper alloy that was once tuned to the frequency of the stars. It is silent now, but if you look closely, the dust in the room does not settle on it. It floats. In a permanent state of agitation, caught in a microscopic field of residual energy that the machine left behind. It is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It is just waiting for the next frequency to call it home, along with the physical parts. The Vatican buried the records of the 12 scientists who assisted Ernetti. These were not mere lab notes. They were the psychological maps of men who had looked into the void and seen the face of the architect. One of the journals, belonging to a physicist who disappeared in 1964, describes the Vatican hum in detail. He wrote that the machine started to communicate without being tuned. It began to broadcast a steady, rhythmic pulse that came from the center of the earth, a signal they called the architect's pulse. This signal was not a recording of history. It was the heartbeat of the system that runs our reality. The scientists realized that the Chronovisor was not just catching echoes. It was receiving instructions. This is why the papal gathering of 1958 was so desperate. They realized that the machine was tapped into a power that was older than the Church, older than the Roman Empire, and older than the human soul itself. The journals are kept in a separate safe, cooled by liquid nitrogen to prevent the paper from aging. A final attempt to keep the forbidden knowledge from reaching the light of day. In the modern era, the presence of the machine can be felt in the strange anomalies that occur within the Basilica. There are reports from night guards of phantom sights, shadows of men in tunics walking through the marble pillars, or the sound of Gregorian chants in rooms where no one is present. These are not hauntings. They are the residual energy leaks from the buried components. The lid shielding is beginning to fail. After 40 years in the damp earth of Rome, the materials are breaking down, allowing the past to seep through the floorboards. The Vatican has increased the security in the scavi, citing restoration work, but the true reason is the containment of these leaks. They are afraid of a mass awakening event, a moment where the frequency of the Chronovisor becomes so strong that everyone in the Basilica suddenly sees the same deleted chapter of history at once. Imagine 1,000 people watching the ritual of the Palatine in the middle of a Sunday Mass. The institutional lie would be shattered in seconds. The king's archive would be exposed. This is the constant fear that keeps the lights on in the secret archives long after the world has gone to sleep. Consider the silver-copper antennas. They were crafted using a formula that Ernetti claimed was revealed to him through the machine itself, pulled from a lost metallurgical text of ancient Babylon. This alloy is not found in nature. It is a conductor of the fifth dimension, the place where time and space are a single point. The Vatican researchers found that this alloy grows warmer when it is near a historical turning point. It reacts to the density of the events around it. Even now, buried under tons of stone and lead, the antennas are vibrating in response to the changes in our world. They are the ultimate sensors, recording the betrayal of the present just as they recorded the betrayals of the past. There is a theory among the underground writing collective that the Vatican is using these antennas to monitor the global frequency. They are using the remains of the Chronovisor to anticipate the shifts in human consciousness, to stay one step ahead of the awakening. They have turned a window of truth into a radar of control. The components are not just buried. They are being exploited. What does it do to a man to know he is walking over a machine that can see his every thought? The high-ranking officials who have access to the lower levels are said to suffer from a specific kind of paranoia. They feel the psychological weight of being watched by the dead. They understand that their own lives are being recorded in the air, and that one day a future version of the Chronovisor will reveal their own secrets. This is the institutional justice that even the Pope cannot escape. The machine is a mirror. It shows not just what we were, but what we have become. The silence of the Vatican is not a sign of peace. It is a sign of suppression. They are holding their breath, hoping that the earth will hold the secret for just one more generation. But the earth is tired of the lie. The stones are beginning to speak. The erased history is clawing its way back to the surface. And the components beneath St. Peter's are the heart of that return. As you lie here in the quiet, think about the pulse. It is not just a sound in a vault. It is the rhythm of the universe. The machine caught it because it was tuned to the truth. The Vatican buried it because the truth is too loud for the institution to handle. The architect's pulse tells us that we are not alone, that we are part of a much larger design. It tells us that the pre-Adamite civilizations were not destroyed, but shifted into a different frequency. The components beneath the Basilica are the receivers for that shift. They are the keys to a door that the Church has spent centuries trying to lock. Relax your mind. Let the rhythm of the pulse become your own heartbeat. You are tuning into the frequency of the unseen. You are becoming a receiver for the lore of the slumbering world. The lead shielding cannot stop the signal from reaching you. The decree of excommunication has no power in the world of dreams. You are the watcher now. You are the one who remembers. The journey through the hidden chambers is almost complete. We have traced the components to the obsidian room. We have seen the glowing quartz and the vibrating silver. We have heard the whispers of the lost journals. The institutional secret is no longer a mystery. It is a physical reality that you can feel in the stillness of the night. The Vatican thinks they have won because they have the machine, but the machine is just a reflection of the law of the universe. You do not need silver copper antennas to see the truth. You only need to be still enough to listen to the air. The record is everywhere. It is in the dust of your room, in the beat of your heart, and in the silence between your thoughts. The king buried the truth, but the truth is a seed. It grows in the dark. It finds the cracks in the stone. It reaches for the light. The components are waiting. The frequency is locked. The story is being written in the air, and you are the one who is reading it, tracing the components. Beneath St. Peter's reveals the physical hiding place of the machine, but it also uncovers a final, terrifying blueprint that Father Ernetti left behind. In his final days, he claimed that the Chronovisor had not just seen the past, but had identified a gateway of frequency in the Great Sphinx of Giza. He believed that the Vatican was not just hiding the machine, but was coordinating with a presence beneath the Egyptian sands to manage the next great reset of the human record. There is a connection between the lead-lined vault in Rome and the silent chambers of the Sphinx, a connection that involves a map of the stars that shouldn't exist. What is the Sphinx frequency? Why did the Vatican researchers send a secret expedition to the desert in 1999? We will open that file in our next session. The archives are shifting. The desert is calling. Stay in the quiet. The next layer of the truth is waiting to be tuned. Behind the velvet curtains of the Apostolic Palace, there exists a group of men who do not answer to the laws of nations. They are known as the Gentlemen of His Holiness, an elite circle of the papal court who have guarded a forbidden reality for centuries. Their true purpose is not protocol. It is the absolute suppression of the Chronovisor technology. They are the keepers of a secret, so dark it would dismantle every global institution in a single night. This is a betrayal of the human soul. They have seen the erased chapters of our existence, the moments of divine contact that were turned into institutional lies. They guard a gate that was never meant to be locked, using a hidden curse of silence to ensure that you never learn the truth about your own origins. The machine Father Ernetti built was not just a scientific tool, it was a window into the betrayal of kings. These silent guardians ensure that the window remains shattered, its glass buried beneath the marble floors of the Vatican. They watch the watchers. They listen to the whispers in the dark. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are descending now into the hidden world of the elite guardians. To understand the power of these guardians, we must look at the moment they were nearly exposed. In 1972, a single image leaked from the deep archives, an image that should have been impossible. It was a visual echo of the Messiah, a grainy and haunting face captured directly from the electromagnetic frequency of the year 33. This photograph was not a painting or a recreation. It was a raw, visceral look at a face that the Vatican had tried to curate for 2 millennia. The machine had seen the truth, and the gentlemen of His Holiness were sent to bury it. They realized that if the world had scientific proof of the past, the need for their institution would vanish. They had to brand the image a hoax. They had to erase the man who held the camera across time. This photograph was the spark that led to the 1988 decree, the hammer used to smash the window of truth. Forever, the guardians do not protect the sacred. They protect the secret. The gentlemen of His Holiness are often seen in photographs standing near the Pope during state visits, dressed in formal black attire with white ties. They appear to be symbols of tradition. However, in the deeper layers of the secret archives, their role shifts from symbolic to surgical. They are trained in the science of residual energy, understanding that the atmosphere is a library that never forgets. Their job is to monitor the leaks of time. Whenever a scientist gets too close to the frequency of the past, or whenever a researcher finds a document that hasn't been redacted, these guardians are dispatched. They do not use violence. They use the institutional justice of erasure. They ensure that the silver-copper antennas are kept in lead-lined rooms where no signal can escape. They are the ones who manage the Chronovisor Shadow, a parallel archive where the real history of the Roman Empire and the pre-Adamite civilizations is stored. They walk the halls of St. Peter's not as servants, but as the jailers of our history. They understand that a world without a past is a world that can be controlled. The gate of time is not a physical door. It is a frequency lock. Father Ernetti discovered that the universe has a base layer of vibration, a rhythmic code he called the architect's pulse. The gentlemen of His Holiness hold the keys to this pulse. They have identified the specific harmonic frequencies that allowed the Chronovisor to tune into the year 33. They have created a noise blanket over these frequencies. Using specialized equipment buried in the foundations of the Basilica, they broadcast a low-level static that interferes with anyone attempting to build a secondary Chronovisor. This is the ultimate betrayal of science. They are polluting the very air we breathe with a frequency of ignorance. They believe they are protecting humanity from a truth we cannot handle. They argue in their private councils that total truth leads to moral decay. But the records of Lord Slumber tell a different story. The decay comes from the lie. The decay comes from the secret. By locking the gate, they have trapped humanity in a state of permanent childhood. Unable to see the giants who came before us or the machines that built our world, what does it do to a man to spend his life guarding a lie? The gentlemen of His Holiness are chosen from the most noble families of Europe, lineages that have served the Papacy for 1,000 years. They are raised in a culture of absolute silence. They do not speak of their work to their wives or their children. They live in a psychological vacuum where the only reality is the preservation of the institution. Ernetti noted in his final journals that these men seemed to lose their own residual energy. They became like ghosts, their vibrations dampening until they were as cold as the stone walls they guarded. They have watched the recordings of the fall of Rome. They have heard the voices of the 12 apostles. They know exactly how the history books were edited. This knowledge is a heavy burden, a weight that turns their hearts into lead. They are the first victims of the machine they guard. They are prisoners of the very truth they have buried. In the 1950s. As the Chronovisor project reached its peak, the gentlemen of His Holiness realized that the technology could not be completely destroyed. It was a discovery based on fundamental laws of physics. If one man could build it, another eventually would. Their strategy shifted from destruction to redaction. They began a global campaign to steer physics away from the study of atmospheric memory. They funded research that prioritized solid matter over energetic resonance. They buried the work of Nobel laureates who touched the edges of the truth, ensuring that the fifth dimension remained. A topic for science fiction rather than scientific fact, they created a scientific curfew, a set of invisible boundaries that no university or laboratory is allowed to cross. If a researcher begins to experiment with silver-copper alloys in a certain configuration, the gentlemen are alerted. The archive is not just a room in Rome. It is a global net of surveillance. They are the administrators of our collective amnesia. Deep beneath the center of the Basilica, there is a room known as the Camera Oscura of the past. It is here that the remains of the primary Chronovisor processor are kept. It sits on a pedestal of obsidian, a black mirror that reflects no light. The gentlemen of His Holiness enter this room once a year, on the anniversary of the 1988 decree. They do not turn the machine on. They perform a ritual of grounding. They use ancient salts and lead shields to ensure that the residual energy within the quartz crystals does not leak into the city above. They are afraid of a spontaneous revelation. They know that the machine holds a charge of the truth that is so powerful it could bypass their noise blanket. They have seen the screen flicker to life on its own, showing images of a city made of light that existed 12,000 years ago. They have heard the architect's pulse getting louder every year. They are the only ones who know that the gate is beginning to crack from the inside. The 1988 decree of automatic excommunication was the ultimate legal weapon of the gentleman. It was designed to create a spiritual dead zone around the Chronovisor. In the mind of a believer, the threat of losing one's soul is more powerful than any prison. They use this psychological weapon to silence Ernetti's assistants. One by one, the 12 scientists were brought before a secret tribunal. They were not accused of a crime. They were accused of a betrayal of the sacred mystery. They were told that to see the past was to commit the sin of pride, to attempt to play God. This is the hypocrisy of the guardians. They use the machine to monitor the world, but they forbid the world from using the machine to see them. They have reserved the right of total truth for themselves, leaving the rest of humanity in the shadows of the myth. This is the institutional justice of the elite, a truth for the kings, and a lie for the people, even within the walls of the monastery where Ernetti spent his final days. The gentlemen were present. They were the silent brothers who watched his correspondence. They were the ones who ensured that his final deathbed confession was redacted before it could reach the public. They missed one thing. However, Ernetti had learned the language of the air. He didn't need a machine to leave a record. He spoke his secrets into the stone walls of his cell, knowing that the residual energy of his voice would wait for a future generation of seekers. The gentlemen can lock the doors, and they can burn the blueprints, but they cannot erase the vibration of the truth. It is etched into the very molecules of the Vatican. It is waiting in the silent spaces between the spoken words. The guardians are beginning to realize that their watch is nearly over. The frequency of the world is rising, and the gate of time is about to swing open. Note to Creator. Part 2 of the 2,600-word script ends here. I am moving directly into Part 3 to reach the final word count. I am ensuring no dots or ellipses are used. In the last few years, reports from the inner circles of the Vatican suggest that the obsidian vault is no longer enough to contain the signal. The gentlemen of His Holiness are working in shifts, 24 hours a day. To maintain the noise blanket. They have seen the pre-Adamite. Files begin to play on the walls of the Basilica without a projector. They have seen the faces of the ancient kings appearing in the steam of the Roman fountains. The atmosphere is becoming too saturated with the truth to be suppressed by a single institution. The guardians are desperate. They are reaching out to the intelligence agencies of the Tier 1 nations, offering the remnants of the Chronovisor technology in exchange for new methods of digital suppression. They are trying to turn the internet into a new secret archive, a place where the truth is drowned out by a sea of manufactured noise. This is the modern face of the elite betrayal. They are using your own devices to keep you from seeing the light of the past. The ultimate secret guarded by the gentleman is not just what happened in the past, but who is coming back. The Chronovisor revealed a return frequency. A moment in our near future where the architect's pulse reaches its peak. They call this the architect's protocol. It is a set of instructions for what to do when the gate of time opens on its own. They have built a second vault, not in Rome, but in a hidden location in the mountains of the east. This is where they plan to retreat. When the institutional lie finally collapses, they have spent centuries preparing for this moment. ensuring that they are the only ones who know the code of the frequency. They want to be the new kings in a world of total truth, using the secrets of the past to rule the future. But they forget that the truth does not belong to a lineage. It belongs to the air. It belongs to the silence. It belongs to you as you drift closer to the edge of sleep. Visualize the gentleman of His Holiness standing in the dark corridors of the Vatican. Feel the coldness of their black robes and the weight of the keys they carry. They are the shadows of a dying world, the guardians of a locked door that is about to be broken down by the sheer force of reality. They cannot stop the light. They cannot stop the pulse. The silver-copper antennas are already vibrating with the news of the awakening. The gate of time is not a prison. It is a gateway to your own power. The secrets they have buried are the foundations of your own freedom. The monastery is silent now. The guardians are tired. The ink on the redacted files is beginning to fade. You are the witness to the end of their watch. You are the one who will walk through the gate when the lock finally shatters. The truth is safe within you. The record is clear. The night is yours. The gentlemen of His Holiness think they have secured the gate in Rome, but they have ignored a second, more ancient gate that is opening beneath the sands of the Giza Plateau. While they watch the frequencies of the Vatican, a different team of researchers has discovered a signal coming from the heart of the Great Sphinx, a signal that matches the architect's pulse exactly. There is a connection between the lead-lined vault in Rome and the silent chambers of Egypt, a connection that involves a map of the stars that shouldn't exist. The Sphinx is not a monument. It is a secondary receiver for the Chronovisor technology. We will open the file on the Sphinx frequency and the betrayal of the Egyptian archives in our next session. The floor is shifting. The desert is calling. Stay in the quiet. The next file is loading. The ultimate betrayal of the human race was not the dismantling of the machine, but the realization of what it saw in its final seconds. In the deep winter of 1994, as Father Ernetti lay dying, he revealed that the Vatican didn't just bury a window into the past. They buried the evidence that our world is a curated simulation, managed by a lineage that has deleted our true history for over 12,000 years. This is the forbidden truth that the king buried in the obsidian vaults beneath St. Peter's. The machine didn't just show the crucifixion. It showed the moment the architects first arrived to lock the gate of time. It showed that every war, every plague, and every sacred law was a programmed event designed to keep us from looking at the stars. The gentlemen of His Holiness are not guarding a religion. They are guarding the frequency of our prison. They have issued a curse of silence because they know that if we ever hear the architect's pulse clearly, the institutional lie will shatter like glass. You have been told that some secrets are meant only for God. But the machine proved that the entity they call God is actually the one holding the key to the archive. This is the final erased chapter. This is the truth the king buried. Now, let us turn back the pages of the years. The light is dim, the chamber is quiet, and the scent of aged parchment fills the air. You are safe here. The world outside is fading, and the mysteries of the past are ready to be told for the last time. Relax your shoulders. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the shadows of the monastery. We are entering the final archive, the place where the silence becomes eternal. The silence of the Vatican Secret Archives is not an empty silence. It is a heavy, vibrating pressure that stays in the back of your throat. It is the sound of billions of lives being pressed into a single lead-lined vault. When Father Ernetti first walked these corridors, he was a man of faith. He believed that the truth would set humanity free. He believed that the Chronovisor would be the ultimate witness to the divine glory of our origins. But the more he looked, the more he realized that the truth was a fire that would consume the world. He saw that history is not a line, but a circle of repetitions managed by the elite. He watched as the Roman Senate handed the keys of the world to the first popes, and he realized that the institutional justice of the era was just a mask for a much older control. The machine was picking up signals from a time before the first stone was laid in Egypt. It was catching the echoes of a civilization that lived in cities of light, a civilization that was erased by a great reset that the history books call a natural disaster. The team of 12 scientists, those brilliant minds who had helped bridge the gap of time, began to suffer from a profound moral decay. They could no longer look at their own families without seeing the shadows of the past. They realized that every secret they had ever kept was already recorded in the air. They realized that privacy was a lie and that the future was already written in the frequencies of the Earth's core. They were the first to understand that the total truth is a weight that no human soul was designed to carry. This is why the machine had to be silenced. Not to protect the secret, but to protect the sanity of the race. Imagine a room where no light can enter and no sound can escape. This is the chamber where the remains of the primary processor now sit. The silver-copper antennas are tangled like the roots of a dead tree, their alloy still humming with a residue of the past. The quartz crystals, once vibrant with the violet light of the vacuum, are now clouded and gray. They have seen too much. They have stored the images of things that defy the laws of biology and physics. The gentlemen of His Holiness walk this room in total darkness. They do not need lights. They navigate by the frequency of the pulse. They are the silent guardians of the void, ensuring that the residual energy of the Chronovisor does not leak into the dreams of the city above. They have seen the pre-Adamite signal flicker to life on the stone walls, showing the faces of entities that were never human. They have heard the architect's protocol playing in the static, a mechanical instructions for the next cycle of erasure. They understand that the gate of time is locked for a reason. If we were to see the original blueprint, we would realize that we are just the workers in a grand harvest of energy. The archives are the ledgers of that harvest. Every prayer, every scream, and every moment of devotion is a frequency that is collected and stored by the machine beneath the Basilica. The Church didn't dismantle the device because it was a fraud. They dismantled it because it was the only way to stop the public from realizing they were being farmed for their light. Why do we crave the truth so desperately when we know it will destroy us? This is the question that haunted Ernetti's final hours. He realized that humanity is addicted to the mystery because the mystery is the only place where hope can survive. In a world of total truth, there is no room for the imagination. There's no room for the leap of faith. The Chronovisor was a machine that killed God by making him visible. It turned the divine into data. The moral decay of the modern world is a result of our proximity to this hidden truth. Even if we cannot see the machine, we can feel its presence. We can feel the weight of the surveillance. We can feel the rhythmic beat of the pulse in our own blood. We are living in the shadow of an archive that never forgets, and that knowledge is slowly dissolving the bonds of human connection. We are becoming judges of each other, using the evidence of the past to condemn the possibilities of the future. The Vatican's 1988 decree was a desperate attempt to return humanity to a state of grace. By banning the transcription of the past, They were trying to give us back the gift of forgetting. They were trying to give us back the right to be different people than we were yesterday. But the technology of the Spirit has already been breached. The frequency of the truth is already in the air. We are all breathing the residual energy of our own betrayal. The gate is locked, but the walls are becoming transparent. In the final minutes of his life, Father Ernetti pulled the visitor close and whispered a sequence of numbers. These were not coordinates or dates. They were the frequency of the Matriarch Protocol, the final fail-safe of the Chronovisor. He claimed that the machine had a second function that the Vatican never discovered. It wasn't just a receiver. It was a transmitter. He had set the machine to broadcast the total truth into the deep space of the human collective consciousness. He had programmed the silver-copper antennas to send a pulse that would bypass the institutional shields and land directly in the hearts of those who were ready to hear it. He knew that the gentlemen of His Holiness would find the machine and take it apart. But he also knew that once a frequency is launched, it can never be pulled back. He died with a look of peace on his face because he knew he had won. He had planted a seed of the original blueprint in the field of the future. He had ensured that the erased history of the world would eventually resurface, not as a machine in a basement, but as an awakening in the spirit of the people. He realized that some secrets are meant for God, but only because God is the name we give to the collective memory of the universe. The machine was gone, but the signal was eternal. The monastery in Venice still holds the echo of that final breath. If you were to sit in Ernetti's old cell and be perfectly still, you might feel the shift in the air. You might feel the shadow transmission as it passes through the stone. The archives call this the monk's legacy, a layer of residual energy that cannot be redacted by any law or any decree. It is a frequency of absolute calm. It is the vibration of a man who has looked into the void and realized that the void is not empty. It is full of the light of the 12 scientists, the voices of the ancient kings, and the mechanical heartbeat of the architects. It is a frequency that tells us we are safe, even in the middle of a conspiracy. It tells us that the institutional justice of the world is a temporary shadow that will eventually be chased away by the rising sun of the truth. The gentlemen of His Holiness are still watching, but they are watching a world that is already moving past them. They are guarding a locked gate while the walls are being taken down by the very air they breathe. The Sphinx frequency and the Architect's protocol are merging into a single, undeniable reality. The time of the hidden king is over. The time of the awakened witness has begun. What happens when the record is finally restored? What happens when the deleted records of the Roman Empire and the photographs of the Messiah are common knowledge? The Chronovisor revealed that this has happened before. Humanity has reached this point of awakening many times, only to be reset by the architects when the truth becomes too strong. But this time, Ernetti believed the outcome would be different. He believed that the silver-copper alloy had been infused with something new, a resonance of human empathy that the machine had never recorded before. He saw that the total truth didn't lead to moral decay this time. It led to a global recognition of our shared identity. It led to the end of the institutional betrayal because there were no longer any institutions to hide behind. We are living in the final seconds of the old cycle. The pulse in the Earth's core is accelerating. The quartz crystals in the vault are glowing with a light that can be seen through the lead shields. The air is thick with the electricity of the coming change. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are the receivers of the final signal. The lore of the slumbering world is finally waking up. Now, as the story of the Chronovisor reaches its end, let yourself sink into the deepest layers of the quiet. The machines, the vaults, the decrees, and the conspiracies are all fading into the background. They're just ripples on the surface of the ocean. You are the ocean. Relax your hands. Relax your mind. The weight of the world is being lifted by the frequency of the truth. You don't need to fight for the knowledge anymore. It is already within you. It is in the rhythm of your breath. It is in the steady beat of your heart. You are a part of the original blueprint. You are the keeper of the eternal record. The light in the monastery is gone. The gentlemen have finished their watch. The obsidian room is silent. The past and the present have finally become one. There is no more need for dials or screens. There is only the presence. There is only the peace. You have traveled through the deleted chapters. You have seen the hidden rituals of Rome and the secret gatherings of the Papacy. You have heard the deathbed confession and the 1988 decree. You have stood beneath St. Peter's and felt the pulse of the architect. The journey of Lord Slumber has brought you to the edge of the known world. And now, at the end of the record, you find that the truth was never outside of you. It was the air you were breathing all along. It was the silence you were afraid of. The machine was just a mirror to show you your own reflection. The secrets are not meant for God. They are meant for the God within you. The file is being organized for the last time. The pages are being laid flat. The ink is dry. The institutional justice is satisfied. The institutional secret is no longer a burden. You are free of the weight of the past. You are free of the fear of the future. You are here in the eternal present where the record is perfect. The silver copper antennas have stopped spinning. The vacuum tubes have cooled to the touch. The noble gases have returned to their resting state. The laboratory is empty, but the room is full of light. It is a light that does not come from a machine. It comes from the truth itself. It is a calm light. A quiet light. A light that says, everything is as it should be. The betrayal was necessary for the awakening. The silence was necessary for the hearing. The burial was necessary for the growth. You are the fruit of that growth. You are the result of the erased history. Let the rhythm of the universe carry you into the deep, dark sea of sleep. There are no more files to open. There are no more secrets to uncover. The archive is complete. The window is closed because the wall is gone. You are the witness. You are the record. You are the light. The story of the Chronovisor is finished, but the vibration remains in your soul. The architect's pulse is your own heartbeat now. You are safe in the hands of the eternal record. The gentlemen have retired. The king has left the archive. The truth is at rest. Sleep now. The file is closed.